Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Happy Tuesday. It is now July 8th. We are one step closer to Notre Dame beginning fall camp, which means we are one step closer to Notre Dame kicking off down in Miami on August 31st. Today, we have another awesome show in store for you guys. We are going to be previewing the tight ends for the Notre Dame 2025 roster. We're continuing the position preview series that we're rolling out here now that summer's kind of winding down, as fall camp's a little bit on the horizon. So we're going to be talking tight ends today. And then in part two of today's show, we are also continuing Notre Dame's opponent preview series. We will be breaking down Notre Dame's sixth opponent of the season, the NC State Wolfpack, who Notre Dame will be hosting this year in South Bend for, I believe, the fifth time in their series history. More to come when we break down NC State. But Bryan, we got some good topics coming their way today. A lot of fun discussion around Notre Dame's tight ends and their future opponent in NC State. Quick reminder, this is a preview of NC State specifically. This isn't about matchups and how Notre Dame matches up and stacks up against NC State. This is just about the Wolfpack specifically. So a lot of good things coming your guys' way today. I'm ready to jump into tight ends today, Bryan.
Trev, I knew this topic would have you fired up, and what's funny is this is going to be a very low watched show every year. Every year when we preview tight ends, it's one of the lower viewed segments we do. I have no idea why when you consider Notre Dame's tight end view, but you'll see that in the numbers reflected in how many people are in the show today compared to yesterday. But it's a very important position, and it's one that's going to have a say on just how good Notre Dame can be this year. I think they need this position group to be better than it was a year ago. I don't think it's like, oh, it's nice if it is. I think it needs to be better in a lot of different ways, and we'll break that down. But I knew when I put this on the original schedule, like, oh, Trev's gonna have fun that day because you talk about tight ends more than anybody I know, and I get it. It's Notre Dame. This is a position that should be a strength for Notre Dame, and it's a talented roster. But we got to see them kind of go live it out and stay healthy, and all the other things are going to go into it. But it's a unique position, Trev, because it's one that is talented, but there's a lot of question marks. And then of course, NC State is that's our trap game. That's the team we pick as a trap game. It's a very intriguing team. It's a big year for them, and this is one of the breakdowns I've been most looking forward to be completely honest with you, because of how unique of a team they are. They're in a very unique situation, and I'm looking forward to talking about them. But of course, tight ends is where we got to start, man.
I'm ready to jump right in previewing Notre Dame's tight ends.
I thought about putting the tight ends with the receivers. I was like, no, Trev will get mad at me if I don't give the tight ends their own show. So here we are to preview the Notre Dame tight ends.
I wouldn't get mad at you. I would just go off on a 45-minute tangent about tight ends.
He's like, we're going to make this its own segment.
Don't worry. Yeah. Don't worry. We'll get in the tight end talk. But Notre Dame's tight end room is in a very unique position heading into this season. You look at the roster, and I know that'll get pulled up here in a little bit, but you look at the pieces in the room, and there's talent there. There's a lot of talent when you consider Eli Raridan and Jack Larson. Ty Washington comes over from Arkansas. James Flanagan's now on campus. But it also has a lot of questions, and it, up for debate now, considering the injury that happened to Charles Jagasaw, who has the most question marks going into fall camp on offense as far as position groups go. But I really think that outside of the top slot there with Eli Raridan, this group has a lot of questions on offense.
And I would even argue, as you look at the uniqueness of this position, I think Eli Raridan has a lot of questions, which we'll get into when we kind of break down the individual players. But there's not a single player on the depth chart at tight end that you're like, yeah, I'm not really sure what to expect from him this year. That's true from every single guy. I think, like, obviously the biggest question mark on the whole team is quarterback. We don't know who's going to start. Those guys have never played and all that. But, like, after that, I think it's fair to argue that tight end is the biggest question mark on the team, just because of the lack of certainty from what those players have done. And, you're talking about Eli Raridan, Trev, you and I think the world of Eli Raridan. We both think he's going to have a breakout season, and we think he's going to have a big jump in production, and we think that he's got a shot to emerge as one of the better tight ends of college football. But the guy's coming off of a season where he caught 11 passes for 90 yards, which happens to be career highs for him. You know what I mean? So It's not like he's proven he can do it. It's not like over a period of time. It's not like he's proven he can stay healthy for extended periods of times. Same thing with Kevin Bauman. Jack Larson has not played a meaningful down of football. Ty Washington has had like one big game in his career against Ole Miss and then hasn't done a whole lot outside of that. Then he got, removed from the Arkansas team last year. You look at Cooper Flanagan. When's he going to be back? We have no idea if he's even going to be able to come back this season. Does he just kind of come back for the last 4 games in the playoffs? I don't know, because he had an Achilles injury, which is a pretty significant injury, and he had it late in the year. He had it during the playoffs. So we don't know what his status is going to be. Then you've got a freshman in James Flanagan. So if you look at it from a pessimistic point of view, you're going to be like, dude, this is a major question mark. But on the flip side, if we don't talk about what we don't know about these players and talk about what we do know, it's like Eli Raridan has as much talent as just about any tight end in the country. Jack Larson's got some of the best hands you're going to see at the position. Kevin Bauman's a big, experienced, physical kid that can give you something. We saw what he could do in the spring game. Ty Washington, he hasn't done a whole lot, but when he has been targeted, it's been pretty good. Go ask Ole Miss when he had 7 catches for over 90 yards and a couple scores against Ole Miss a couple years ago. Look at James Flanagan. It's a top 100 recruit coming out of high school. Well, man, Cooper Flanagan, if they get him back for like the last 4 games in the playoffs, that gives you an extra talent. So I could spin this either way I want to go, but the reality is both of those things are true at the same time. The talent is enormous. The size is a big group. It's a very big group. Jack Larson at 6'3", 250 is the small guy at tight end. And it's a talented group. There's depth there. If you just look at the piece of paper, say, hey, we'll get to the depth chart breakdown. Like, dude, that's a lot of guys. They have walk-ons that can help this football team if they need to, which we'll talk about. So that part's exciting, but then you also can't ignore the other part. If you're having an honest and objective conversation about the tight ends, those two things go hand in hand. The talent and the potential with the inexperience and the injury history, those two things go hand in hand. The question is going to be with this unit this year is, which one comes to the forefront? Is it the lack of experience? Does the injury history kind of rear its ugly head again? Or does the potential turn into production? And that's what's going to tell the tale of this unit at the end of the season, because right now, as of early July, it's a legitimate question mark. We could be sitting here at the end of the season and be like, hey, this was pretty darn good. We didn't really know what the tight end room was going to be like going into 2023 after you lost Michael Mayer, one of the best tight ends ever play here. Like, well, Mitchell Evans had 3 catches in the bowl game at the end of the year. Like, okay, that's nice. 3 catches for 30-some yards. That's nice. Eli Raridan, showed some promise, but then got hurt and you're like, okay, well, I don't know what to expect from the tight end room in 2023. And it turned out to be pretty darn good in 2023, up until Mitchell Evans got hurt, which again brings us back to that. So it's been a very intriguing position the last 2 years. The production's been good, but it hasn't kind of taken that jump since Michael Mayer left. Does it take the jump, or is it more of the same where promise, flashes, but not the consistency that we had under Michael Mayer and under Cole Kmet back in 2019 and players like him? So we're going to find out how it's going to be, but how that story is told, Trevor, is going to have a significant impact, in my opinion, on this 2025 season.
Yeah, Brian, I agree completely. Look, this room on the entire team has the most room for variance because we don't really know what the floor is because of the inexperience.
Yes.
That's the toughest part to kind of read the room here. There's a lot of questions on the defensive line, also about health. There's a lot of questions now on the offensive line, but we have a good idea or just kind of know what the floor of that group is. As of right now, the floor of the tight end room is like a combined career 17 receptions almost. And that would be shocking if that's what they put out in 2025. So not only is the ceiling an unknown because of how talented the room is, we just don't know what the foundation is for this room. And I think that makes the conversation all the more interesting when you talk about this position room. But let's dive into this, Brian. Once again, Notre Dame is having to replace an NFL tight end. Mitchell Evans gets drafted. He goes to the Carolina Panthers.
That's the one certainty at tight end.
Literally.
If you start at tight end for Notre Dame, you're going to get drafted. Yes. And there's a good chance if you're number 2 tight end at tight end at Notre Dame, you're going to get drafted. Yeah. That's a certainty. That streak continued with Mitchell Evans being a 5th-round draft pick this year. That's the one thing we do know.
It is. That's the one consistent. And honestly, a pretty good consistent selling point to have if you're on the recruiting trail. It's not a lot of surprise that, Ian Premer and Preston Frizzell wanted to go to a place that's just cranked out NFL caliber tight ends. But Notre Dame heading into 2025 is in a similar spot, something they're very familiar with. They have to replace their tight end one who got drafted. A lot of teams, a lot of people will kind of look at that and say, oh, gosh, how good is Notre Dame's tight end room going to be after they lose another NFL caliber tight end? Because of the ceiling, this room has the potential to be better than what it was last season. Bryan, I know that you have some numbers to back that up, but this room has all the potential in the world to be better from a week-to-week basis, from just a raw number standpoint, but can it be? And that's the big question.
Well, it's really a twofold conversation, Trevor, because it's not just about, can it be better and things along those lines, but it's, do they want it to be better? And I think that's something that people have asked, and I'm going to kind of show you the numbers here to back that up. But this is basically what, if you look at the tight end production over the last 10 years, and I think this is where some misconceptions have, but they're misconceptions based on understanding it. Look at the tight end room last year is productive, 60 catches for 593 yards, 8 touchdowns. That's very good production. Year before, 52 catches, 686 yards, so fewer catches, more yards, and fewer games, same amount of touchdowns and fewer games. And then, of course, 2020 to 2022 is the Michael Mayer era, so you understand why the production was big there. You had Cole Kmet in 2019. 2018, you had Alizé Mack, Cole Kmet. 2017, you had Durham Smythe, Alizé Mack. Cole Kmet, Brock Wright. 2016 was a year where there was a lot of injuries to the position, and that whole team just stunk. And then 2015, Durham Smythe gets hurt in the second game of the year, and he doesn't come back to the bowl game. And you've got a true freshman in Alizé Mack, and Nick Wisher and Tyler Luatua. The talent was way different then than it is now. And then some people say, well, Mike Denbrock didn't throw a lot to the tight ends at LSU. That's true. But why would you force the ball to the tight ends when you have Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas? That's part of it too. Then you go back and look at Cincinnati, and the tight end production under Mike Denbrock at Cincinnati was very good during his tenure there. I mean, his last year at Cincinnati, his top 2 tight ends, Josh Wiley and Leonard Taylor, combined for 54 catches for 600 yards and 10 touchdowns, despite having a receiving core that had Alec Pierce, Tyler Scott, Trey Tucker, and Michael Young. 3 of those 4 guys got drafted. And so what the story has basically been is when Mike Denbrock has the talent at tight end to make it more of a focal point, he'll make it more of a focal point. When they don't, like 2015, when Durham Smythe goes down in the second game of the year, and you've got Will Fuller and CJ Prosise and Chris Brown and Amir Carlisle, and you've got a freshman tight end, you're not going to throw as much to him. But they were not afraid to throw to him in clutch situations. If you go back and remember the Temple game in 2015, that game-winning drive, who's the player that sparked that drive? It was Alizé Mack on a corner route, big play corner route, which got that drive going. Then obviously they capped it off with the Will Fuller back shoulder touchdown. So when the talent is there, he has no problem throwing to the tight end. I think the production last season had more to do with the fact that I don't think Mitchell Evans played very well for most of the season, if we're going to be frank about it. And I think the other part of it too is I don't think the quarterback was necessarily someone who had a affinity for throwing to the tight ends. You saw it a little bit more later in the year, but at Duke, Riley Leonard, the tight ends were check down players for Riley Leonard at Duke. And I just don't think he ever really got out of that mindset. We saw last spring the tight ends being used more, and we saw this spring the tight ends being thrown to a lot more. And so I think Mike Denbrock wants to use the tight ends more, but he's not going to force the issue just because. It needs to come within the structure of the offense. This year, I think what we're going to see from the tight end room is I don't know that they'll get to 60, 70 catches like they did last year or under the Michael Mayer era, but I think what you're going to see is a jump in yards. I think we're going to see it look more like 2023 where fewer catches but a lot more yards is what I think we're going to see because of twofold. Number one, you have tight ends that have a skill set that should allow them to be more effective down the field. But also you're going to have young quarterbacks that are not going to have 3 years of this is how I've always viewed the tight ends the way that Riley Leonard did. It's not a knock on Riley Leonard. That's just the reality. And it's also the reality when you miss the entire spring and you don't get that chance to develop those players. And it wasn't just because of him. Even if Riley Leonard was healthy, Eli Raridan was limited, and Mitchell Evans didn't practice. So he wouldn't have had them to throw to anyway. So there was a lot of factors that went into why that team did not focus on the tight end as much as it has in the past, or even as much as we thought they were going to coming into the season. Now the question is, well, okay, that's fine, but what's it going to look like this year? And I think that's really a fair question about what role are the tight ends going to have? Are they going to be complementary players? Are they going to be a focal point in the offense? Does that vary week to week? I think that's a very legitimate question, but the question is going to be determined by what we talked about at the beginning. How healthy can this unit be? If you can't count on the guys to show up every week, you're going to have a hard time building your game plan around them. Does Eli Raridan kind of show the assertiveness that we want to see from him that we didn't see from him or Mitchell last season? The consistent get me the ball. Mitchell Evans always wanted the ball. You can see it in his body language. Every time he did get a pass thrown to him, he wasn't happy about it. But he didn't do the things he needed to earn those touches a lot of time last year. So that's going to be big factors in what they're going to be able to do. The good news is, at least in the spring, this unit did stay healthy. There were injuries that we had coming into the spring with Cooper Flanagan getting hurt in the playoffs, but Eli Raridan was a full participant this spring and had a really good spring. From what we saw while there, but also from what sources have said. Kevin Bauman looked as good as he's looked since before all the injuries set in. I thought Jack Larson had a bit of an up and down spring, but when he was on, he looked really good, as we saw in the blue gold game. And I don't know what to expect from Ty Washington and James Flanagan, but what I've heard from sources, James Flanagan's going to play this year. He's going to be a force this year. So it's a very, very important position, Trevor, and I'm very curious to see what role they have in the offense. I can project and say what I think, but at the end of the day, we really don't know what that role is going to be from the tight end room because, as we talked about, Mike Denbrock has to have uncertainty right now. Like, okay, I love these guys, but are they going to be able to answer the bell every week? I don't know how he doesn't have that question. And they just got to keep proving it and keep proving it. And if they can stay healthy, I do think the production this year is going to be improved compared to last year. I have very little doubt in my mind, especially when you look at young quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the conversation we had yesterday around just the passing offense in general. It's not about volume. It's not about total yards that you put up. It's about how effective are you when you decide to throw to the tight ends. And last year just wasn't an effective part of the offense. A lot of their touchdowns came in not meaningful minutes. If you go back and think about Cooper Flanagan had one late in the game. Eli Raridan caught one late against Stanford on like an RPO rollout play. His one against USC was spectacular. Slot fade, complete mismatch. I expect to see a lot more of that this season. But to your point, it was very inconsistent last year. And you know how heavily I weigh impact in big games. And we talked about, how much better the passing offense looked in the playoffs compared to the regular season. But the tight ends weren't a big part of that. There's a lot of factors that go into that. Mitchell Evans had a big catch early in the Penn State game. Tight ends were relatively absent against IU. They were absent against Georgia. Against Ohio State, they had opportunities. Like I said, not all of the issues with the passing game was on them. Eli Raridan should have had 50 to 60 receiving yards at least in the national championship game. Another conversation for another day. But again, you start to weigh heavy moments. One of the reasons why we are so optimistic about the receiving room is because of what they did in the postseason, on top of who they bring in the transfer portal. One of the questions that I still have about the tight end room is, what is it going to look like in big moments? We saw it in spurts. Cooper Flanagan had a big corner route catch against Texas A&M. He's not going to be playing in the regular season, most likely. Eli Raridan had one good slot fade against USC in the final regular season game. And then outside of that, wasn't targeted that much. He only ended the season with 11 receptions. And so there are a lot of questions there. Would it surprise me if we fast forward to December of 2025 and it's, hey, the tight ends were great this year? No, that wouldn't surprise me one bit. But is it unrealistic to think that we fast forward to there and they were a part of the offense? Didn't do a whole lot against Miami, had that one catch against Texas A&M, exploded against, Navy. And it's okay, yeah. But yeah, it's up in the air right now. It's a lot of questions. But when you look at the overall depth chart, it's promising because the talent's there.
Well, and when you look at uh, Eli Raridan's career and you just kind of look at the targets that he has had, it's pretty impressive. I mean, this past season he caught 78.6% of the throws he was targeted, 11 out of 14. And 2 of them went for touchdowns. And so he wasn't throwing the ball a lot. But as you and I have talked about, Trev, when there are games where when he was targeted, he showed he could do something. We think of I think it was a corner route that he scored a touchdown on in 2023. Just outran the defense. The talent's there, but to your point, it's fine, great. But you're still talking about a guy that's got 16 career catches. There's got to be some level of okay, the talent is there, but can they do it? But what we saw in the spring is them using the tight ends a lot more in the offense, and not just the quarterbacks throwing to them. There were plays we saw, and I don't want to go into too much detail because I'd like to be asked back to practice this next year. But there were routes where it was clear that the tight end was part of the primary read. I don't want to say the number one target because I don't know that that's how it's always taught. Like when you're running smash, I don't know that there's a number one route. There's the where you'd like to get the ball, but it's one of these 2 guys is part of the primary read, and that's what I'm referring to. And then we saw some ways where they were getting the ball where it's very clear that is designed to go to the tight end, more so than we saw in the previous spring, partly because the unit was healthy. So I don't think that there's any doubt that they're going to want to get the ball to the tight ends. And we've seen it with Kenny Minchie and C.J. Carr both in the blue gold games the last 2 years. And the same was true for Steve Angeli last spring. They had no problem throwing to the tight ends in the spring games. It was Riley Leonard's the one that wasn't necessarily keen on throwing to tight ends. And then this is not a now that he's gone bash Riley moment. I'm explaining to you why that was. He just wasn't – that wasn't what he was really taught to do at Duke. You're asking like, well, how come the production at tight end went way down? Well, look at Riley Leonard's tight ends at Duke. Their number 1 tight end in 2023 had 15 catches for 147 yards, and their number 2 tight end had 5 catches for 52 yards. Their tight ends only caught 20 passes for 199 yards, less than 10 per catch, only 1 touchdown. That's what we're talking about. Then 2022, Riley's first year as a starter. His number 1 tight end caught 21 passes for 170 yards. His number 2 tight end had 4 catches for 47 yards. So his tight ends only caught 25 passes for 217 yards. That's exactly what they were last year, except used more. So again, it's not a shot at Riley. It's just the reality of what he'd been kind of groomed to do. And then when you miss the whole spring and the tight ends miss a chunk of the spring, you can understand why he doesn't necessarily have a great rapport with the tight ends. It's just a reality, not a criticism. But now you're looking at younger players that we've seen in practices and we saw in high school and at different times, especially for CJ, well, they have no problem throwing to the tight ends. I mean, the first 2 attempts, I believe, that CJ had, and well, they weren't his first 2 attempts, but 2 of his first attempts, the first drive, he hits Kevin Bauman and Jack Larson on deep balls. It's not a coincidence. It's not an accident. He has faith throwing to the tight ends because both balls were contested throws where he's like, look, I'm going to go give those 6'5" guy, and Kevin Bauman and the 6'3" guy that I know because I've been throwing to him for 3 years, and Jack Larson, who's got great hands, I'm going to give them a chance to go make a play. And I think we're going to – that's why I'm optimistic we're going to see more of that, assuming that the unit can stay healthy.
Agreed.
That's going to be the big question.
And those catches were on a Don Schuler. Sometimes people can take away from blue gold games like, oh, did you see – I remember in the 2024 blue gold games, oh, did you see, Chris Mitchell's double move? I was like, yeah, on Charles Dew? I would hope so. Yes, I did see it. But shout out to my boy Charles Dew. But also, when you're talking about 2 tight ends, and especially one in Kevin Bauman and one in Jack Larson, it's not like Eli Raridan made those. These are 2 guys where their roles are really undefined for this upcoming season. Right. Do it up against the starting safety who's starting in the national championship game, who started all 16 games. I do put weight into that.
Yeah, and he was in good position, and especially the first one, he wasn't as good a position, but he actually did a great job in recovery because it was he was kind of coming downhill. CJ has to backtrack, then he has to kind of pivot and run to the tight end. It was a little bit of a broken play, and CJ and Kevin Bauman both make great plays. Second one was just a slot fade.
Yeah,
and Adon was in really good position. It's just perfect ball, perfect catch. It is really what it was, and so I think that the desire is there from Mike Denbrock to do that. And I've heard people say, and again, it's understandable that people would say that because of you look at his 3 stops as a coach. First stop, tight end wasn't used a whole lot. It was at Notre Dame. And then in last year, or LSU, it wasn't used a whole lot, although he still threw to Mason Taylor a decent amount, but it's not like Mason Taylor was never used at LSU. I mean, he caught, I think it was like 36 passes in 2023. Let me go back and look at his numbers.
He caught the game winner against Alabama.
Yeah.
Brian Kelly's first year.
36 catches for 348 yards and a touchdown in 23 when he was banged up. The year before, he had 38 catches for 414 yards and 3 touchdowns. Had another tight end with 5 catches for 55 yards. Cole Taylor that season. So, but not like what we expect of it. But again, Michael Mayer doesn't put up the numbers he had in 2022 if he's got Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. He would have still been very good, but it wouldn't have been the way the volume that it was. So when you look at the tight end position, it's more about, okay, it doesn't need to be what it was under Michael Mayer, because you have Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse and Will Pauling and Jordan Faison in the backs you have, but you need to be impactful however much that you're targeted. But I say this, do you go into this recruiting cycle and put as much effort into getting Ian Premer if you plan on using your tight ends as just blockers and complementary weapons? No, you're perfectly fine with Evan Jacobson and Preston Friesel. Perfectly fine with that. You wouldn't have worked as hard to get Ian Premer as you did if tight end wasn't something that Mike Denbrock wants to eventually be. And it goes back to the adage that we've talked about. You coach what you have, not what you want. You recruit what you want, you coach what you have. And Mike Denbrock did that last year. That's just who Riley Leonard was. And as we saw later in the year, Riley got a little bit more comfortable throwing to the tight ends. And we saw the production take a jump. I mean, if you think of, the jump ball that he threw, through Mitchell Evans against Florida State that they ended up overturning. I still don't agree with that decision to overturn that play, but he was more willing to do that. You think of the corner route that he threw. I can't tell if it was a corner route or a slot fade. I kind of look like a corner based on the way that Mitchell ran the route. Might have been a slot fade against USC that he threw Mitchell Evans for the touchdown of that game. So, I mean, Mitchell Evans had his 3 most productive games that he had of the season last year came in the last 5 games, USC, and then the last 2 games against Penn State and Ohio State. I mean, was it first drive of the game? He throws that go ball on the post-snap switch wheel up the sideline. He hits Mitchell Evans on the go ball up the sideline. So it wasn't like as the season went on, you saw him get more and more comfortable looking to the tight ends. And in the national championship game, I know Mitchell Evans caught 4 passes for 52 yards, but I believe Eli Raridan, I'm pulling up, I think he had 2 for 20 in that game as well. Let me pull up Eli real fast. Yeah, he had 2 for 20. And so he caught 11 passes last year, but 5 of them were from USC on. And so we saw them use the tight end position more down the stretch than we did throughout the season, because I think Riley got a little bit more comfortable throwing to those players. But, it really comes down to what are they going to do? How are they going to perform this year? And that's the big question.
So, Brian, let's dive into the depth chart and the overall breakdown of this room individually. We're going to first, to kind of round out the first part of the show, we're going to break down this room as a whole. Just kind of take a look at everybody in here that's on the roster. And then in part 2, we're going to dive into everybody individually. But when you look at this overall room, what are some of the things that stand out to you initially, Brian?
Well, I think the biggest thing you look at is it's got really good size and length. But the other thing you look at is there's some versatility of talent when you break this group down. There is obviously a guy that's a little bit of a dual threat player in Eli Raridan. Kevin Bauman's going to be more of a blocker and a chain mover. Jack Larson's more of a pass catcher. Ty Washington's more of a pass catcher. James Flanagan is more of a traditional tight end. Justin Fisher's more of an H-back, guy that you could hand the ball off to just as much as you can do the other things. Henry Garrity's a talented walk-on, a little undersized. And then Cooper Flanagan, we don't know when he's going to get back. He's at the bottom of the depth chart because he's not going to start the season healthy. So it's a unique group, Trev. But as you also look through the depth chart, you see a lot of guys that, talented, but like I could use this for every guy. Boy, Eli Raridan's really talented and give you all the reasons why we have him as a breakout player, but he only has 16 career catches and has to prove that he can stay healthy. All right. Kevin Bauman, former 4-star recruit. You remember the big catch, the back shoulder catch he had up the seam against Ohio State in 2022. Great catch. Then he gets hurt like a game later. Hey, big kid, physical kid, lots of heart, tons of potential, but he's a 6-year player for a reason because he keeps getting hurt. Jack Larson, great pass catcher, really good route runner, smart kid, quality athlete, dominated at the Irish Invasion a couple years ago, which is why he got offered over guys like Christian Betancourt and some other players. But, he's been inconsistent in the practices we've seen, and he hasn't played a meaningful snap. We could keep doing that for all these guys. And that's what becomes very obvious. But what you see is it's a very long group. It's a very athletic group, and it's a versatile group. And that's something that you need at tight end. You can't just have a bunch of cookie cutters because the tight end is asked to do a lot of different things in the Notre Dame offense. And it's not always the same guy that's asked to do that. And I think that's something that's important when you're talking about putting this depth chart together.
I think it's also a very, I don't want to say experience, but I guess veteran group in terms of being around college. This is the one position on offense where a lot of these guys, the majority of these guys are upperclassmen. You go and look at everybody's class as senior, 6-year senior. Then, Jack Larson's a sophomore. Ty Washington's a senior. Justin Fisher's a senior. Henry Garrity's a junior. Cooper Flanagan's going into his junior season. And so contrasted to the rest of the roster, when you have rooms like the running back room where the oldest person is Jadarian Price, and then after that, you kind of have a bunch of underclassmen outside of him and Jeremiah Love, really, when you think about it. Same thing with the wide receiver room. A little bit more even split in the wide receiver room with some of the transfers, but this tight end room is they have a veteran presence, because I don't want to say experience, because, again, you go and pull up production, and it's kind of a lack thereof conversation.
Yes.
But they've been around collegiate programs, this collegiate program, for a long time.
Yeah. It's it's kind of funny to talk about, Trev, but they're a very veteran group, but they're not a very experienced group.
Yeah.
It's like Eli Raridan in his career. Let's just go look at his offensive numbers in his career. He's played 672 snaps. That's a decent amount of snaps over 3 years. But then you look at, how he's been used in the pass game. He's only been targeted 22 times. Kevin Bauman in his career has played parts of 4 different seasons because of injuries. He's played 203 snaps. That's it's a decent amount of snaps. But then you look at him from a receiving standpoint, he's been targeted 6 times in his career. By the way, he's 6 for 6 when targeted. I just want to point that out. 6 for 6 for 67 yards and a touchdown. So they've yet to throw an incomplete pass to Kevin Bauman. Only 6. And then you look at Ty Washington, who has played 298 snaps in his career, which is a pretty good number. But he's only been targeted 17 times. Now, he's caught 14 of those 17 passes for an 82.4% completion rate. So he's averaged 15.1 yards per catch, and he's caught 4 touchdowns on those 14 passes. So it's like, if you put their numbers together, these guys are catching about 80% of the times they're targeted in their careers. You know what I mean? And so, Jack Larson last season for Notre Dame played. Did Jack even get on the field last year? Let me see here. I don't see him as listed as having played last season. Actually, that's a receiving grade. So let me go to offense. Yeah, he did play. I could have swore he played last year. He wasn't targeted last year. He played 7 snaps last season and was not targeted. So it's a relatively experienced group or veteran group as far as age. But as you said, it's not a group that's been targeted a whole lot. Now, you'd have a lot more experience if Cooper Flanagan was coming back, because he's got 422 career snaps, and he's someone who hasn't been targeted a lot either. But 8 times, was targeted 7 times last year. He's got 3 touchdowns. Of his 5 career catches, 3 of them have gone for touchdowns. But he's injured, and he's not going to be back. If they're lucky, he gets back late October, early November. In my personal opinion, based on past with Achilles injury. So it just adds to what how this group is such a dichotomy. When you look at senior, 6th year, senior, and you're like, oh, that's an experienced group. Yeah, kind of. They've been around a while, haven't done a whole lot. So, yeah, I think that's very interesting.
It's a very interesting dynamic when you look at this tight end room. But again, I think this is why we're high on the ceiling of this group, because you go back and you remember the individual plays or the streak of plays that these people have had, at one point or another in their career. But the conversation always comes back to, can you tie it all together for a 14, 15, or 16 game season? That's going to be the biggest question for this group. Because I do believe that this group kind of holds in the balance how close this offense will get to its ceiling. I love the running back room. Love the potential of the receiving core. But you still need that piece of tight ends. I mean, I know we bring up a lot about like national championship stats and where national champions are in comparison to like what Notre Dame has done in recent years. Notre Dame in recent years, their tight end production has been pretty like up to par with what the raw numbers production-wise have been from previous national championship winning tight ends. And I'm not just talking about, Thaddeus Moss in the 2019 LSU offense, but you go back to the impact of what some of other previous national championship winners have been. Look at Georgia on their run that they went.
Do I believe was decent?
Yeah, he was okay. He was fine.
He was solid.
Yeah, he was all right. He was all right. And this is not me claiming that they have a Brock Bowers on their roster or anything like that. But you go back and you look at Michigan, not really known for having a dynamic passing offense, but who did they have? Colston Loveland.
Yeah.
Who is now also an NFL caliber tight end who, whether you agree with it or not, was taken in the NFL draft before Tyler Warren. So he's like, you had talent, you had impact players when you go down the list. I mean, argument could be made is the least impactful one out of recent champions has been G. Scott with Ohio State, and he was still an impactful player at times in the postseason.
I would argue you'd go back to 2018 Clemson, and that team did not throw to the tight ends really much at all.
Yeah. And
if you look at that team in 2018, your leading pass catcher tight end was Braden Gallery, who had 5 catches for 52 yards. Milan Richard had 6 catches for 50 yards, and then Cannon Smith had 3 catches for 34 yards. You get the point. They didn't throw it a whole lot. 2 years earlier, their first title team, Jordan Leggett, is fourth on the team in catches with 46, but he's second on the team in yards at 736, and he had 7 touchdowns. And then they had, the rest of their tight end room caught 6 more passes. So when they had a good tight end, he was a big part of their offense, and that's the whole point. Good coaches are going to use their best players. Good coach, like Mike Denbrock's not the kind of guy that you give him a loaded tight end room, he's going to be like, nah, it's all good. I don't want to throw to them because I like throwing to these receivers. No, if he has a loaded tight end room, he's going to throw to the tight ends. If he doesn't, he's not going to force it. And that's really, or if you have 2 first-round draft picks at receiver, your tight end's going to be used, but he's going to be more of a complementary player than he is a focal point. It's like you don't think Mike Denbrock, if he had Michael Mayer on his teams, would have thrown the ball more to the tight end, either his first stint at Notre Dame or this most recent one? Of course he would have. But it's about using your talent, and that's what makes this unit so intriguing, Trev, is because based on talent. So like if that group right there is healthy and ready to go, that's a talented room that you can utilize. But how much can you really go into the season saying we're going to make it a focal point when you don't know if this group is going to be able to be counted on week after week after week because of the injury history? That's what makes Mike Denbrock's job a little challenging this year, is that. But the one thing I will say is Eli Raridan hasn't really been hurt since Mike Denbrock got here. I'm not saying that has anything to do with it. I'm saying Mike Denbrock hasn't had to deal with that part of Eli Raridan being in and out. And so when you get to that point and you say, okay, he has faith in Eli Raridan. We saw that this spring. Now he has to back that up with his performance. But what you see is a talented room, but a room with a lot of question marks. We've been saying this whole time. And how many of those question marks get answered positively is going to determine if this room becomes a key part of the offense or if it's just a complementary player group of guys where sometimes they do something well, sometimes they don't. And, 1 week they have 2 catches for 12 yards. The next week they have over 100 yards. What will it be? Will it be that or not? That's what we're going to find out.
Well, that's going to do it for part 1 of today's show. Just a quick overview of this tight end room as a whole. Up next, we're getting ready to dive into each player specifically, but don't go anywhere. We still have a lot more content coming your way. Before we get to the second part of today's show, guys, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards. You see it scrolling down there at the bottom of your screen, boards@irishbreakdown.com. Give the Champions Lounge a good run through, because a lot of the questions that we get in mailbags, a lot of great conversations go on there. IB is a wonderful community. I'm happy to be a part of it in the way that I am. You can find all that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Today's show, we are going to break down this room individually. Last section, we kind of looked at this room as a whole, but now we're going to break down some of the individual pieces that are in this room. And there's no better way to start it off than Eli Raridan, who is projected to be and will be their number one tight end, barring any sort of injury. So when you look at Eli Raridan, pretty, I guess you could call it, tumultuous career so far with Notre Dame, suffered his fair share of injuries, but last season he was finally fully healthy, played in all 16 games for Notre Dame. He was relatively healthy in the spring of 24, played in all 16 games, and has remained healthy this entire offseason, and had as close to what you can have to a breakout this spring, especially from a lot of the things that we've seen. According to your sources, a lot of the things that you've heard about Eli Raridan, he is on the brink of a breakout season.
For Eli, it just comes down to, can you stay out there? Like, that's really what it comes down to. Can you stay out there? We've seen this from Notre Dame tight ends a million times over the years. You'll see a guy that one guy leaves and another guy steps in, and he doesn't have a lot of career production, and he has done this, has done that, and then he steps into the void and just dominates. We've seen that time and time and time again from talented Notre Dame tight ends, and that's the expectation for this group. If you look at Eli Raridan, he's got 16 career catches coming into the season. What was Cole Kmet's career catch numbers going into 2019? It's 17. And then what did he do that year? 43 catches, 515 yards, 6 touchdowns. Georgia couldn't cover him, and he becomes a second-round draft pick. That's what happens at Notre Dame. When you look at this past season and you look at what Mitchell Evans did in 2023 before his injury, he had 29 catches for 422 yards, 14.6 per catch. He was in the middle of a stretch of play where he was dominating. 7 for 75 against Ohio State, 6 for 134 against Duke, 4 for 71 against Louisville, and had like a 30-something plus yard game called back because of a penalty by the right tackle. Went for 2 for 13 against USC, and then went 5 for 66 against Pitt and got hurt. Mitchell Evans came into that season with 5 career catches. So this is what you do when you haven't done a whole lot, because somebody who is an NFL player in front of you gets drafted. You step into the void and you get your opportunity, and that's the opportunity that's in front of Eli Raridan to be the next in a very long line of tight ends who do that. I think Troy Nicholas had 5 career catches going into the 2015 season, if I remember correctly. Maybe. I think he had 5 catches the year before. I'm looking at this. Yeah. And because remember, Troy Nicholas began his career as a linebacker at Notre Dame, moves to tight end, catches 5 passes for 75 yards as in 2012. Tyler Eifert, one of the greatest to ever do it at Notre Dame, leaves. And then Troy Nicholas steps into the starting lineup, catches 32 passes for 498 yards and 5 touchdowns, and becomes a second-round draft pick. Right? So anyone with a brain that's paid attention to Notre Dame over the last 20 years knows, I don't care what his career production was coming into the season, you're going to have your opportunity to go shine. And that's what's in front of Eli Raridan right now. It's, dude, you've got the tools. You're 6'7", you're 250, you're athletic, you got great ball skills. His route running this spring was very impressive from what we saw. This is your chance to shine. What's interesting about Eli is when he first showed up, the expectation was he's going to be a pass catcher. And then as a freshman, he was their best run blocker. And he's been a little bit inconsistent. He was inconsistent in that regard last season. Sometimes he looked good blocking, sometimes he didn't. I thought he blocked really well in the blue gold game. Especially, he had a great block where Luke Tauch is coming down in the hole, and he comes off his double team with Kevin Bauman and just knocks Luke Tauch completely out of the hole. Jadarian Price comes right off of him and rips off a 20-yard gain. So he's got the tools to be a complete all-around tight end. And he's a matchup nightmare because you can put him in the boundary, you can put him in the slot, you can put him in the field, you can put him attached, you can have him as a movement piece. He can really do all of it. The tools are there for him to be a star. It's just about, does he have the drive to be a star, and can he stay healthy? And when I say does he have the drive to be a star, it's not that he hasn't shown it. Let me say this. It's not that he hasn't I'm saying like he has struggled to show that desire so far. I'm not saying that. He's never been in this position. He's never been the guy at Notre Dame. Now he is the guy. Now is his opportunity to do that. Just like we didn't know if Will Fuller had that going into 2014. Will Fuller only had 6 catches the year before as a true freshman before he breaks out in year 2 and goes over 70 catches for 1,000 yards. It was a question for him going into that season because until you've been put in that situation, we don't know how you're going to handle that situation. And that's the unknown about Eli Raridan. And it's been a kind of a big offseason for him, if we're being honest, because he's kind of been thrust into that role. He's now a husband. So congrats to him. He got married this summer. And so like your future's right in front of you now because you've played 3 years at Notre Dame. You've exhausted your eligibility in each of the last 3 years. You've used the season of eligibility. You now go into this season. This is your chance. This is your chance to shine. This is your chance to go show the world that, no, I am that guy you thought I was coming out of high school. I was behind some older players. I had some injuries, but now I'm healthy, and it's my chance to shine. And I'll be honest with you, he has more talent, in my opinion, than Mitchell Evans did. But he's got to go show it, that he can be that guy. He is a different type of player than Michael Mayer. I'm not going to say he's better than Michael Mayer. He's a different type of player. He's a guy that I think can stretch the field. He's a guy you can get the screen throws to. He's a guy you get quick game to and let him use his speed. So I think he brings a different element than you've had at tight end for a few years. He really reminds me a lot of Troy Nicholas. Just 6'7", kind of fast, athletic guy that can stretch the field, that can get in some matchups where you use his speed and see what kind of production he can do. But everything is there for Eli Raridan to step into the void and say, hey, I'm that next great tight end at Notre Dame. That's the opportunity he has in front of him, and he's got the talent to do it. Now he just has to show that he's able to be healthy and then just go do it.
The further and further we get away from all of his injury history, the more comfortable I feel. You guys know at this point that I'm a very much I got to see it person, but there are some schools and some position groups within those schools where it's just kind of a given what's going to happen. And I have seen it year over year. Notre Dame is the definition of reloading at tight end. Happens every single year, to Brian's point. So for Eli Raridan, he's kind of on the brink of being that player of, who you are versus what if. And I'm confident that he's going to be able to take those steps because of all of the tools that he does have. But he's in a really interesting spot coming into 2025. Next guy.
Let me just say one more thing. I think how well Eli Raridan plays this season will have a significant impact on how good this offense can be.
Yes.
Because if he's just a complimentary player that averages around 9-10 yards a catch, I think against some of the better teams in the schedule that have some of the better secondaries you're going to face, if you're playing in Ohio State, if you're playing at Texas, if you're playing in Alabama, teams that we think have the linebackers and the secondary to kind of run with your backs and receivers, you're going to be a little bit more limited, in my opinion, in those moments. Doesn't mean you're not going to win, you're going to get stopped, but I think it makes you a little bit more limited because you don't have a Jeremiah Smith, the receiver, like Ohio State did. As much as I love Malachi Fields and Jane Greathouse, they're not him.
No.
And so the more weapons you have, whereas if Eli Raridan is the player we think he can be, and if Eli Raridan does during the season what you and I saw him do in the Jersey scrimmage and in some of the practices we saw, this offense becomes incredibly difficult to defend. There's going to be times when you're in an 11 personnel 2x2 where you got your slot and your Z to the field, and you've got your tight end and your boundary receiver to the one side, and you're talking about 6'4", 220 Malachi Fields and 6'7", 250 Eli Raridan side by side, and Eli Raridan's a guy that was running in the 4.5s before his second knee injury. Like, this guy can run. That's a matchup nightmare if Eli Raridan is the player we think he can be.
Yeah.
If not, it's like, okay, he's going to run some complimentary role to try to get Malachi, free, and he's going to be a chain mover. I think if he is the player we think he can be, minimum 35, 40 catches, and be a 13, 14, 15 per catch player, I think that completely changes how this offense gets defended. Completely changes it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Next guy that we're going to talk about, role is very much to be determined And I know we got done talking about Eli Raridan's injury history. And unfortunately, Kevin Bauman has also had his fair share, arguably more injuries than what Eli Raridan has had to deal with in his career. You know, you go back and you look at what Bauman's had to go through. In 2021, he fractured his fibula, which sidelined him for 2 months. In 2022, he suffered his first ACL tear in September at practice, and then his second ACL tear was suffered in camp ahead of the 2023 season, which kept him out for the entire year. Last year, he came back. He was fully healthy, caught his first career touchdown pass against Purdue late in the game from Steve Angeli. It was honestly a good play. I mean, he sat down in the zone, he drifted back, found the opening, and then Steve hit him for his first career touchdown.
Second tight end TD pass that Steve threw in that game. So
yep.
When Riley went off the field, all of a sudden tight ends become a factor in the offense. I'm just saying.
Because his first one was to Cooper Flanagan.
Yeah, and they ran that play early in the game, and Riley didn't look at Cooper Flanagan.
Yeah, that's right. But Kevin Bauman is somebody who we really don't know what to expect from him this season. And again, we could have that conversation with a lot of people, but baseline for like a Ty Washington or a Jack Larson, we have some sort of idea of like how they could be used in the offense. Same thing with James Flanagan. But Kevin Bauman is the guy where I really don't know what to expect from him this season. But in a lot of projected depth charts, in a lot of conversations, he is, for all intents and purposes, right now their number 2 tight end getting ready to head into fall camp. So he's in a really interesting spot this year.
There's 2 things about Kevin Bauman that you talk about. One is just, look, guys, we don't know what he's going to do. We don't know if he can stay healthy for an entire season. But, I mean, last year he starts off and he's, kind of battling for that number 2 spot, and then he gets injured again and isn't used a whole lot, and wasn't really counted on a whole lot last season. And so, the other part of it is, I mean, how much can you put on him and then he gets hurt again? Like that's a really interesting, let's say Kevin Bauman has a great summer and a great fall camp. How much can you really count on him each week? That's one of the challenges of a guy like Kevin Bauman. Because you want to believe he can go out there and help you, because he can. He can block. He's smart. He can catch the ball really well, as we saw in the blue gold game. As we saw in the, he knows how to get open, as we saw there. He's a chain mover. He's a complimentary tight end. He's a true 12 personnel tight end. He's that number 2 guy that's a blocker, move the chains, things like that. If you're running high-low concepts with him and Eli Raridan, he's running the high concept if you're trying to get somebody else free. And if you're trying to actually run a route where he might get open, you're running him on the low route and you're running Raridan on the high route. But at the same time, if you could trust him and if he was able to stay healthy, he gives you a good veteran player that gives you a solid blocker and a chain mover who's shown in big games he can make tough catches. I point back again to the Ohio State game in 2022 where he makes that seam throw that was thrown behind him, makes a great catch on that, and that sets Notre Dame up. I think, was that they ended up kicking a field goal? No, they ended up scoring a touchdown on that drive.
Was that Audrick's touchdown?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so, because the first touchdown drive got set up by Lorenzo Styles' RPO catch on the first play of the game, where the Ohio State guy tries to pick it, misses it, Lorenzo catches it and runs it all the way down. They ended up getting stalled. So I think that was on Audrick's touchdown drive. Set up a touchdown in a game where Notre Dame was winning till late in the third quarter. It's just he hasn't been able to stay healthy, and that's the big question mark. But as he showed in the blue gold game, I mean, he's a smart kid. That play was not meant to do that. That play was meant to do something different. He reacts. He sees CJ kind of pump fake. He then reacts, gets open, and CJ finds him. But the other part of it is you just really, really want him to be able to stay healthy for 2 reasons. One is he can help the team, but 2 is it'd be just a great story. Because this kid has had every reason in the world to either transfer or, better yet, just quit playing football. Like we were joking with each other in the blue gold or in the practices. Like he looks like RoboCop out there because he's got like braces on and sleeves on this leg and wraps on this. I mean, he's like a walking like advertisement for like trainer school. You know what I mean? Like you're using him as your guinea pig. You're having all the young new first-year trainers practice on him, and he just goes after all the things. He's just got bandages and everything, and he's just going out there and practicing. Like that kid could spare himself a lot of agony and just quit playing football. But he didn't because he wants to do this. He's got his degree. He's a 60-year senior. He's probably close to his second degree if he doesn't already have it. But this kid loves playing football and he loves being at Notre Dame. He could have gone to an FCS school and played somewhere and been a starter. But he wants to be at Notre Dame. He wants to be part of this thing. And you want kids who are willing to make those kind of sacrifices and go through all the things he's gone through. You want to see them be able to finish their careers on this positive note. So just as a personal story, I'd love for Kevin Bauman to be able to answer the bell every game this year because he can help you, number one. But number two, what an awesome story of perseverance that is just for young people to look up to. If he only catches 3 balls, he plays all year and just it gets a ring at the end of the year, like what a great story that would be. But I think he can help you even more than that.
Well, and he's been a guy that has shown, to your point, Brian, he absolutely had all the opportunities to leave. I mean, he was on kick return last season as a 5th-year senior. Yeah. He was on the field during Jaden Harrison's touchdown. Oh. Now, Jaden Harrison blew by him. Like, respect to him for trying to keep up. But look, he has crossed the threshold of the what-if conversation because of his unfortunate injury history.
He did play 109 snaps last year, by the way.
He did.
On special teams.
But you know that whatever role he is asked to do this year in that offense, he's going to do it at 110% to his fullest capabilities. And that's what I respect about him. I wrote an article about unsung heroes of the 2025 season and its projection, but Kevin Bauman was one of the people that I talked about. A lot of it was around with Cooper Flanagan's injury. They need somebody to step up kind of as their number 2 blocking tight end. You know, the guy that's going to come in, do the unattractive work, put their nose down, be a great edge sealer in the run game, be a chain mover. And I think that's the potential for Kevin Bauman this year. Look, facts are his days of being a 45, 50 catch tight end for 500 to 600 yards, those days are unfortunately behind him, but he stayed for a reason. And I believe that reason is to be that guy for Notre Dame. Let Eli Raridan be the flashy, like catch some, underneath route, run and gun, be a red zone target. Kevin Bauman's going to come in and be an excellent blocker. He's going to come in and be a big presence on 3rd down when he's needed to be. But that's what his role is going to be. And I'm so on the same page with you, Brian. That would be such an awesome story. Because not only do they kind of, in all seriousness, need it, because they do kind of need a number 2 tight end in this offense, but it would be one heck of a story to talk about at the end of the year. Yeah. That's for sure. 3rd guy on this list that we're going to talk about is Jack Larson. And he is somebody that a lot of people on the coaching staff, a lot of other players on the team have coined him with having the best hands on the team, which is high praise considering, they have athletes like Eli Raridan in the same room. They have wide receivers like Jaden Greathouse on the roster. So
Mitchell Evans had pretty good hands as well.
Sure did. And, when you talk about a kid like Jack Larson, he could also be impacted depending on who the starting quarterback is, because he does have that chemistry with CJ Carr as well, like we saw in the Blue Gold game. Not saying that Kenny won't throw to Jack Larson if he's on the field, but you do kind of have a little bit of chemistry with number 13 back there. And so he's somebody that poses a different element to the tight end room because he is 6'3". He's not the 6'7", 250 guy like Eli Raridan is. He wasn't the 6'6", 250-pound guy that, Cooper Flanagan is. But he provides a little bit of a different aspect to the room. And I'm going to be interested to see what he does this season.
Well, I mean, I think he does have the best hands on the team, at least at this position. And that's not a shocker because we've been saying that since he was in high school. I mean, that's the one thing about Jack Larson is he's not the fastest guy. He's a quality athlete. He's not the fastest guy. He's not the biggest guy. He's got pretty long arms, which helps him. But he's got tremendous hands and tremendous body control and tremendous ball skills. Because ball skills aren't just about having great hands. If you have great hands, but you don't have good timing and all those type of things, then you're just not going to be overly effective. But he is very effective. In high school, he was. And he also, what I liked about him, too, is he was a pretty tough kid. He played defensive line as well. And they played a game his senior year against Providence Day, who had Jaden Davis, who's the quarterback. He was a 5-star quarterback, went to Michigan. He was ranked as a 5-star quarterback. Let me be clear. He wasn't a 5-star quarterback, but he was ranked as one. But Jack had a big sack in that game as well. So he's just a football player. Jack's one of those guys that is never going to be, I don't think, a first-round NFL draft pick because at his size, he'd need to be more, a little bit more explosive than he is. but he's just one of those guys. The comp I've given for him is Nick O'Leary, like from Florida State, just similar size. Nick O'Leary was if I remember correct, I don't think he wore like gloves. He just was like really just
No,
his jacket. He just
he didn't wear gloves. He was like number 42.
Yeah, it's like, are you did you transport from 1985 or something like that? Just he was listed at 6'3", 252. He didn't even his arm length, looking at the combine, was 29 3/4 inches. That is really short arms for a tight end. He goes to the NFL scouting combine and he runs a 4.9 in the 40-yard dash. I can promise you that Jack Larson is faster than a 4.9. I can assure you of that he's faster than a 4.9. And then Nick O'Leary also has a 30.5-inch vertical, only a 9.2 broad jump, a 7.43 cone, and a 4.5 shuttle. Folks, those are all below average numbers for a well below average. That's like a good athlete at tackle, and what does he do? When Florida State wins a national title in 2014, he's Jameis Winston's security blanket. He's their number 2 pass catcher that year behind Rashad Green. He had 48 catches, which was second on the team. He had 618 yards, which was second on the team. And he had 6 touchdown catches, which was second on the team. I'm sorry, that was 2013, the year they went to the college football playoff. The year that they won the national championship, Nick O'Leary had 33 catches for 557 yards. He was third on the team in touchdowns, 16.9 yards per catch. A guy that ran a 4.9 had a 16.9 per catch average and had 7 touchdowns. So in his last 2 years at Florida State, a guy that was 6'3", 250 with 29-inch arms, goes out in his last 2 seasons for a team that went, what did they go? 14-0, then 27-1. And he goes out and catches 81 passes for 1,175 yards and 13 touchdowns in 2 years. Would you be shocked if Jack Larson did that at Notre Dame? I wouldn't. I wouldn't, because the kid knows how to play football. He knows how to get open. Now, the thing for Jack is he's got to be more consistent. And that was sort of the thing with him this year is I thought he made that great catch in the blue gold game, but then we saw him not be as assertive in the jersey scrimmage. So I think Jack is still kind of finding his own way. Talking to sources around the program, they were pleased with his growth throughout the spring and thought that he really finished on a good note. Because remember, they had 3 practices after the blue gold game, or 2 practices after the blue gold game. And then, of course, if C.J. Carr's the starting quarterback, that's a connection that we all know is there. And so when you're trying to make your quarterback happy, making sure that at times you've got someone that he trusts on the field, that's another reason that you could see Jack Larson helping. So I think Jack Larson's going to play for Notre Dame this year. And I think he's going to help them in the pass game this year. My question for Jack is he just a niche pass game weapon, or can he become an effective enough blocker to where you can actually use him in 12 personnel and it's not a dead giveaway that you're throwing the football? That's going to be the question mark with Jack Larson. But the one thing I do know about Jack Larson is if you throw him the ball, he's probably going to catch it. There's a really good chance he's going to catch it. Gosh, can he get open enough to get the ball? That's going to be the thing he's got to prove.
Yeah.
Can he be a guy that's not just a pass catcher? That's what he's got to prove.
Nick O'Leary is a name that I have not heard in quite some time. That's a great
Does
comp,
that comp not make perfect sense? And
I
think Jack's faster than Nick O'Leary was. He's more athletic than what Nick O'Leary was.
Yeah.
But Nick O'Leary just now play football. And a tight end that's 6'3", 250 and that ran a 4.9 went on to play 6 seasons in the National Football League and caught over 50 passes because he just knows how to play football.
Nick O'Leary also had the greatest truck stick I think I've ever seen from a tight end. It was against Clemson, and I'll put the video on the board after the show's over. It was one of the craziest truck sticks I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
It was nasty. But no, that's a great comp. If Jack Larson can get his consistency level up, he would be Nick O'Leary. That's a great comp because that's what made him so good, because of his 4.9 40 and his very below average numbers as a starting tight end in college. He was very consistent. That's why he was a main target in that offense. What about Ty Washington, the transfer from Arkansas? He had a little bit more of an interesting road to Notre Dame. Dismissed from the team last year. Notre Dame picks him up in the winter portal, and he's on campus now.
Hold on one second, Trev. I'm gonna do a little something for you right now.
Please do it. Yes.
Just to make you happy.
Ugh. No gloves, number 35, no
Yeah.
towel,
Yeah.
no on the field anything. And
Yeah.
that, yeah, I bet number 11 for Clemson is going to remember that for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
On the road, when
Yeah.
you hear it with the volume too, it's loud. It's
Yeah.
loud, man. Oh, thank you for pulling that up.
Yep.
That gets me going. Oh, we love to see it.
I thought you'd like that.
Thank you. But Ty Washington, next guy on this list in the tight end room, he's another one where his role, as of right now, isn't really carved out just because we haven't seen him yet. He was around the program in the spring,
A little
I believe,
bit,
but he
yeah.
was still finishing up at Arkansas.
He was wearing sweats and slides. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. But he's had a very interesting road to get to South Bend. He was dismissed from the team last fall, midway through the season, I believe, and then he transferred to Notre Dame, announced he was transferring to Notre Dame in the winter portal. So Ty Washington, from the things that you've heard, from the things that you have seen or not have seen, where do you think he kind of fits in with this tight end room?
Yeah, that's the thing that I don't yet know, Trev, is look, I know what he was recruited to be. They took a little bit of a flyer on him. They Mike Denbrock recruited him, I believe, when he was at Cincinnati. So that's where the relationship came from. They had knowledge of each other. He's from Georgia. I believe they recruited him when he was, I'm pretty sure it was when he was at Cincinnati, but it might have been when he was at LSU because he was a true freshman in 2022. So it might have been when he took that job. It might have been at both, maybe. I'm not quite sure when, but I do know that he recruited him. And so that's why there was a relationship there. He had knowledge of him. He knew what kind of kid he was. And, so when he tells you kind of what happened last year, you have a foundation to base that on, that relationship on. But they're taking a bit of a flyer on him. And the flyer is, kid's a pretty good athlete. He's 6'4", 247. We saw him this spring. He's on the leaner side. Very, very long arms and good height and good athleticism. And he's a guy that's had, some moments against some good football teams. I mean, last year at Arkansas, he's only targeted 4 times, only catches 2 passes for 25 yards and a touchdown. Then in 2023, he has this big game against Ole Miss. He only plays 5 games all year, but he has 7 catches, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns against Ole Miss. Catches 1 pass for 24 yards against Alabama. Catches 2 passes for 37 yards against Florida. But like outside of that little stretch of 4 games, which happened kind of right within a month period of each other, he didn't do anything. And so you really don't know what to expect, but they're taking a chance on a kid that's long and athletic that Mike Denbrock has a relationship with to say, hey, if he doesn't help us, we have enough depth to where we're going to be fine with Jack Larson, Kevin Bauman, James Flanagan. Eventually Cooper Flanagan comes back. If he doesn't pan out, it is what it is. No harm done. If he pans out, however, you just got yourself an experienced, long athletic pass catcher. Quality. He's not like an elite athlete, but he's a good athlete that can help you as a blocker and help you, especially in the pass game. So he is the biggest sort of wild card in the room right now because you are taking a chance on him. But I do know that Notre Dame vetted him and they were aware of why he got removed from the team. It wasn't a disciplinary thing. He wasn't getting in trouble. He basically just didn't answer the call in a game. And, his story is essentially, and there's an interview out there where he talks about it. I haven't listened to all of it, but essentially he went through a really tough family situation. I think his grandmother had just passed away, and he just felt he wasn't in a good headspace at that time. And coach didn't like it. Now you should have had that conversation before the game, but young man made a mistake. It wasn't like he went out and committed a crime. It wasn't like he got a DUI. It wasn't like that's what it was related to. And so Notre Dame felt comfortable enough with what happened to say, hey, we know this kid, our tight ends coach, OC, knows this kid, knows the family. We think he's worth taking a flyer on and, going to go to school and do what he needs to do, and hopefully he can help us out. If he doesn't, I don't think you lose anything if he doesn't pan out. It's not like they're putting all their the number 2 tight end eggs in his basket. You know what I'm saying? But if he does pan out, he is the guy that could solidify this depth chart if he can be healthy and help you and just be a really nice complementary number 2 type tight end, number 2, number 3 type tight end with, whether it's Larson or Bauman. And that just kind of speaking of the veterans, we'll get to the freshmen here in a second, but I don't know that there's a surefire number 2 in that group. But what you have are three distinctly different players that you can then cobble together, the three of them, to get your number 2 tight end. When you need someone to block, you put in Kevin Bauman. If you need someone to, pass catch, you put in Jack Larson or Ty Washington. You can get some out of that. So I think the veterans, it's kind of like, look, we got these 3 veterans. Hopefully one of them at least, if not 2, will be able to step returners. Hopefully one of the 2 will be able to step up and help behind Eli Raridan.
His play style is interesting. When I go back and I watch some of his film at Arkansas, some of his best work, he's almost like kind of lined up as like an H-back. They did that quite a bit with him in the red zone, and it reminded me a little bit of Dimitri Flowers from Oklahoma back in 2017. Different body types, but their utilization was very, very similar. I mean, Dimitri Flowers is somebody who ended 2017 with 26 catches, 464 yards, averaged 17.8 yards per catch and 5 touchdowns, and wasn't their premier tight end. But you go and you look at what he did in some bigger moments against Georgia in that, I mean, one of the best postseason games that I've seen in that Rose Bowl that went into 2 overtimes, 3 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown. Earlier that season on the road against Ohio State, 7 catches for 98 yards and a touchdown. Against Iowa State, 7 catches, 95 yards. Against Baylor, he had 1 catch for 52 yards, which went for a touchdown. And so I don't know if he's going to have a similar stat line because of the room that he's in. But he provides a little bit of a different aspect to this offense where he could be utilized a little bit like that. Arkansas didn't use him a whole lot, flexed out wide. They would line him up sometimes attached to the line of scrimmage, but sometimes that was more of as a blocker. He's like 6'3", 6'4". Dimitri Flowers is only like 6'2". And that very much looked a part of a fullback. So different body types.
Dimitri was more of a fullback, but as far as like body-wise, but as how they used him, it was, to your point, it was more like a wing, an H-back. He wasn't lining up, and they weren't running ISO with him going downhill and taking on the mic all day. That's not.
So his utilization could be interesting to see how Mike Denbrock uses him in that way. So that's something I'm looking forward to. Next guy on this list, kind of flipping gears a little bit here, is the young gun, one of the highly touted recruits coming in the 2025 class, and that's James Flanagan, who is now on campus. His role, and I know you mentioned it earlier from your sources, he will be playing this season.
Barring injury, he's going to play.
Which is really, really exciting news. But he is more of James Flanagan does his best work attached to the line of scrimmage. Yeah. He's more of what you think of when you think of like a Notre Dame type of tight end. Really excited to watch this.
When you think old school Notre Dame tight end, it's James Flanagan. And like part of me wonders, like, was he watching film of when his dad was here? Is that how he learned how to play tight end? Yeah. Was he like watching Irv Smith and Oscar McBride and Derek Brown? Like, is that what he learned, how he learned how to play tight end? Because he's very much that kind of player. Look, James Flanagan can help you in the pass game, but he's doing it as a traditional tight end. I mean, this is a kid who's a really good hockey player, broke his dad's, I think it was shot put record in high school. Physical tight end, was a very good defensive end in high school as well. 6'5", he's listed at 237. He'll be probably close to 245, 250 by the time we get to the season. Definitely by the end of the season. Just nasty disposition, physical kid, likes to punish people, knows how to play with good angle. I mean, he's got the whole package as a blocker. But he's also really athletic. And he's a kid that can really help you in the pass game in that regard as well. He's a kid that can stretch the field. He averaged over 20 yards a catch during his high school career. And is a guy, I'm going to actually pull up some of his film here while we're talking, Trev, because you guys will get a chance to just have it refreshed a little bit in your minds what he brings to the table. But, he's a very talented player, Trev, and a guy that you look at and say he can help you right now. He's just not a 5-year guy. So there's no point in trying to, make him a, redshirt him for whatever reason. But as you can see here, he can stretch the field. He's got good body control. He's got good hands. There's a lot of different things he can do. He is a true throwback tight end to what, and I mean that is like when they were good pass catchers, not a guy like, is going to come in and just basically he's not Andy Heck, who spent 3 years at tight end and then moves to left tackle and becomes a first-round draft pick. So, that's what James Flanagan, and this is junior film from James. That's what he brings to the table. I mean, he can literally do a little bit of everything, but when you line him up and attach him, his ability to block, his ability to run the attached routes, seams, overs, crossers, outs, options, ins, digs, things like that, he can do. And he's a big-bodied kid that can really help you a lot. There's still things, and he's still learning. I mean, you see, he's a very raw route runner. He's not a guy that's just a really advanced technical player as a pass catcher, but that is where he's advanced. That right there, just blowing people up, just being physical. He's an advanced player from a run blocking standpoint. He's still learning how to play the game technically sound as a tight end, but you can see he can run. He's a good player.
Yeah. His ability as a pass catcher is awesome, but I love seeing the run blocking with him. Explosive off the line, great usage of the hands as a run blocker. Yeah, it's no surprise. And like you said, this is his junior year film, so it's no surprise that he's going to be making an impact this freshman. Good Lord.
Yeah, there's a lot of clips like that in his high school film where it's just like he's not just blocking a guy, he's punishing a guy.
Yeah.
Just like it's that helpless feeling that you get where you're like, this guy's taking me where he wants to go, and there's not a darn thing I can do about it. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of that from James Flanagan's high school career. So and he really, to me, is why I love that block right there. He is why I'm not as concerned about the tight end position as maybe some others, because if there's just this crazy rash of injuries, you can put James Flanagan in there, go 11 personnel, and just attach him to the line and use him as a blocker. Yeah. Where you don't really – now, that's not ideal because you want the tight end room to be more of a pass game weapon, but there's things he can do as a complementary player, but you're not going to build your pass game around him as a pass catcher as a freshman. You're just not. But you could survive if that were to happen. But if he can be your number 2, your number 3, because everybody's healthy and he just forces his way into that role, that would be the ideal situation, because he might be your best tight end blocker this season. And I don't like throwing hyperbolic statements on freshmen, and that's not what this is. It's just a fact. He could be their best blocker as a true freshman. Like he's just and some things we've heard about what he's done this spring. Let's just say James Flanagan has not been shy attacking the strength program. And we'll just leave it at that. He's exactly in the strength program what you'd think a kid with this highlight tape would look like in the weight room. Yep. So he's going to be able to help you.
Yeah, it's very evident that he's going to be able to. I just love watching him run block, I'll be honest.
And it's why getting Preston Frizzell and Ian Premer was the focal point in this offense, because you already have this kind of guy. And what Premer and Frizzell give you is that sort of that new school tight end type of player. And you put those two together and you've got a dynamic potential 1-2 punch at tight end, whether it's Premer or Frizzell in the field, with a guy like James Flanagan, because he is 6'5" with long arms and good hands, and he's got good vertical speed, and he's but you can use him and Ian Premer together and in very unique ways that present some very difficult matchups for teams. And that's why they focus on that type of player and didn't go as much for this type of player. I mean, there was a couple guys on the board, Evan Jacobson, but when you watch his junior film and you watch Evan Jacobson's junior film, and they're in different universes as players. But I just think when you look at this year's team, this kid can help you. Yeah. This kid can help you right now. Is it as the starter? No. Is it as a guy that's going to catch 50 passes? No. Can he make some plays in the pass game? Yes. But you're going to get this kid on the field in game 1 and say, I want you to fight, maul, battle, scrap, claw with those really talented Miami ends. That's what your job is right now. And then maybe some opportunities in the pass game will come. And I don't think James Flanagan will have a whole lot of problem with that, because I think that's just a part. Maybe he doesn't love it, but he sure plays like he loves it. He sure plays like he loves to punish people and block. And so I think that's what he's going to be able to do for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'm sure the running back room is loving the idea of him lining up next to Anthony Knapp in some sort of combo block situation. Yeah. I mean, love that. Yeah, love that. Next couple guys on this list here, Bryan, to kind of finish out the individual player breakdown. 2 guys, both walk-ons, but we are talking about Justin Fisher and Henry Garrity. And I know sometimes people can hear walk-on and kind of dismiss it, but these are very underrated quality depth pieces to the room.
Yeah. We're not just talking about them because we want to mention everybody on the depth chart. They can help you if the need arises. Justin Fisher's a kid that's been back and forth from tight end and running back at Notre Dame. And he was a kid that was an option quarterback in high school, very good athlete, strong kid, not built like the other tight ends. Obviously, he's shorter and built more like an H-back. And that's really what Justin Fisher's role would be. As you can see here, 6'2", 233. You're not going to line him up in a 9 technique and say, okay, go base block all game long. This is a movement piece. This is a kid that's, going on the backside of split flow zone and taking the backside tight end. This is a kid that you are kind of wrapping up inside and saying, hey, we're going to full block you. We're going to have you lead up on the linebacker, take him. You're going to block a 9 technique in a reach as we stretch, or maybe crack down block on guys. But you're a guy that can help us in the throwing game. I mean, he's the kind of kid I could see if he's in the rotation, you're throwing a shovel pass to keep somebody off balance. He can do something with the ball in his hands. He's not your typical walk-on, and neither's Henry Garrity. And Henry's smaller, he's thinner, so I don't know if Henry's physically ready to help you right now. But athletically, I think Henry Garrity brings some things to the table that can help you. You saw him in the spring going through drills. Kid's an athletic kid. He can catch the football. He's probably, I think, a year away from physically being ready to really help them. And that's why he wasn't a bigger Division I recruit. It's some MAC offers. I mean, this is not a kid that, he's only here because his dad was here, in that meaning, like, he's probably only here because his dad went here. That's why he has an affinity for Notre Dame. But what I mean by that is he's not some kid who would have been playing like Division III football, some kid I would have been recruiting if it wasn't for his dad being Notre Dame. He was getting some FCS and some MAC level and a lot of FCS offers. This is a good football player. The reason he didn't get more is because he's just not a real big guy. He's 6'3", listed at 225 as a junior, and that's taken him some time to get to that point. If he can just add a little bit more strength, then I think Henry Garrity is a guy that in a pinch could help you in some ways, in a similar way as, like, he's in the Jack Larson, Justin Fisher, Ty Washington mold of being able to help you. And then hopefully, Trev, at some point in time in November, you can get Cooper Flanagan back, because that can be a real unique aspect to it as well. If you could somehow get him back in the month of November and maybe have him play 4 games in the regular season, then play all the postseason games, and he can still take a red shirt and still have 2 years of eligibility left. I don't know if they're going to be able to get him back, but that would be the hope.
Yeah, he's kind of the wild card in the room. And I think if it wasn't for his injury, I'm sure we would all feel a lot better around kind of the state of the union of the tight end room. But fact of the matter is he does have the Achilles injury. On the, I guess, glass half full mentality, to your point, he comes back sometime late November and is able to contribute in the postseason, because he is one of, if not your most established run blocking tight end in the room right now.
He's also your most experienced player on the room.
Yep.
As far as snaps.
Yep.
Correct.
Absolutely. And then he has shown his ability in the pass game. Caught that big corner route against Texas A&M, caught a touchdown against Purdue. I think he caught one more.
He caught one in the didn't he? It was late in the year. Was it Florida
Virginia.
State?
I think Virginia. It was Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the late season home games.
Yeah, I think it was Virginia.
Virginia. You are correct. Play. Yeah.
But he's a capable pass catcher, does his best work, again, attached to the line of scrimmage as a blocking tight end. I mean, there's a world where, if James Flanagan comes on as the run blocker that we believe him to be, and then somebody like Cooper Flanagan comes back again in postseason and is physically ready to contribute, then that could be another lethal dynamic as far as run blocking goes. But he's kind of the wild card of the group, but his injury is unfortunate. Yeah,
it is. We'd be having a lot less of the questions about what the room looks like if Cooper Flanagan was healthy.
Yep.
We'd be talking about Notre Dame having a legitimate 1-2 punch at tight end that complement each other extremely well, because Cooper can catch the ball clearly, but Cooper has been at his best as a blocker in his career, and he's a big kid. He's 6'6", 258. Like, you'd have 2 massive tight ends there as your 1 and 2.
Yeah.
If he didn't get hurt late in the year. But we'd be the entire tone of this conversation today would have been very different if Cooper wouldn't hurt, because he had no injury history prior to that. He had the one little minor thing that he had early in the year where he tries to make a catch on a horribly thrown ball against Miami of Ohio that Roddy threw to him, and he got, like, I don't remember if he hurt his ankle, or I forget what it was. It was I think it was a lower body injury, but he got hurt trying to make a play on a really bad ball. But it wasn't like a devastating season-ending injury like Bauman's had, like Eli Raridan has had, and things like that. I mean, he came back and played, but he didn't have any kind of significant injury history. Yeah, I'm looking at it now, Trev. He only missed the Louisville game.
Yep.
That's the only game he missed after that injury. So he missed the Louisville game and came back and, against Stanford and helped you. He didn't play as much, and he didn't really start ramping up the reps until you got to November, but he was still there and helping. So when I look at Cooper, we're having a very different conversation if Cooper Flanagan's not hurt.
Agreed. Well, that's going to do it for part 2 of today's show, where we broke down the individual players in the Notre Dame's tight end room. But don't go anywhere. We still have one more segment to go when we talk about tight ends. We're going to cover some big questions. We're going to do some season predictions. Then after that, we're previewing NC State, Notre Dame's 6th opponent of the season. But before we get there, you guys know what to do. Please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. That's how we grow business. That's how we attract more listeners. So we greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, to round out the tight end conversation today, we are going to cover a few different things. We're going to talk about biggest questions. We're going to talk about what a successful season is going to look like for him, and then we're going to round it all out with bold predictions. And again, some of these biggest questions, some of them are a little bit more obvious than others, but they're questions because we don't know the answers to them. If we had the answers to them, they wouldn't be big questions. You know what I mean? But to kick it off, Brian, I'm sure the biggest one on all of our minds for this upcoming season is health.
The only way that's not number one is either A, you're not listening, or B, you just joined the show and you don't know that we've talked about that already. But like anyone that's paid attention to this room knows that's the biggest question mark is, can this unit get healthy and stay healthy? That's just,
yep.
That's all there is to it. And honestly, that's number one. And then it's even unfair to say the next one's number 2. It's only that way because it's, sequential. It's like one giant gap between 2, 3, and 4. This is it. We could have honestly, if we wanted to be like lazy or not even lazy, just really concise, say, look, this room just has to stay healthy. And I don't know if they can. That's it. Welcome to the tight end show. Have a great day. Talented room, but we don't know if it can stay healthy. And that's your tight end preview. Let's move on to NC State. I mean, like that's really what it comes down to. If they're healthy, they're going to be fine. Like that's how I feel about this room. Now, there's different levels of fine. Fine is they're good players, or holy moly, this is one of the best tight end rooms in college football. That's to be determined. But like, it's not a weakness. If you tell me at the end of the year, Brian, I went in the future, and all I know about the future is that the tight ends were all healthy all year. I'm like, all right, cool. They're going to be solid. At the very least, solid at tight end. I don't know if they're going to be great, but they're at least going to be solid.
Oh, yeah. And look, the health of the room is going to kind of naturally answer the other 3 questions that we have about this group. Like they are still questions as of today on July 8th. Yeah. But if I know that they stay healthy, I'm a lot more confident in questions 2 through 4 being answered. Right. And with that being, the second question is, how important will they be in the passing offense?
Yeah.
We expect Notre Dame to take a big jump this year as far as their passing efficiency goes, their effectiveness in big games. And like we alluded to earlier, the tight ends are going to play a big part of that, specifically Eli Raridan, because of his unique skill set, because of his size, because of his speed. But how much will they be a part of the passing offense when they do have Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, their slew of running backs out of the backfield? How important will they be in this passing offense? It's still a question that we have right now.
It is. I mean, they could be anything from just complimentary players. I think if they're all healthy, it'll look a little bit like last year. 55 to 60 catches in a 16-game season, average around 10 to 11 yards per catch. That's the floor if this room is healthy. The ceiling is it's 50, 60 catches and you're averaging about 13, 14 yards per catch. and you're getting to 10 touchdowns, and this is a room that's impactful. Man, you remember that big win over Miami when Eli Raridan did this, or that big win over USC when Jack Larson did that, or whatever the case may be. There'll be that. That's the ceiling of what this room could be. But I think, to your point, how healthy they are is going to have a big role in how much they're used. And then, of course, the third one, which is kind of easy, and it kind of points number one is, but it's not so much the same. That's why we made it separate, is because when's Cooper Flanagan come back? If he comes back earlier in the year and he's actually good to go, then I think a lot of these questions kind of get answered, because now you have even more bodies. If he comes back later in the year and he's good to go, then I think that gives you a nice shot in the arm as you go into the postseason. But then he may not come back and be close to himself at all, depending on Achilles are still tricky. So I think that's a big question mark, is when will he return, and then what will he be when he returns? Because if you could tell me at some point in time Cooper Flanagan is going to come back and look like the guy he did before the injury, I'm like, all right, cool. Okay, your tight end room is going to be much better in the postseason. But we don't know when or how he'll look when he gets back.
Well, in ideal state, whenever he is ready to come back, or kind of walking that line of like he could play if we needed him to play, ideal state is the rest of the tight end room steps up their play so you don't have to rush him back.
Right.
So he is the best version of
himself. Because if you do,
I
mean, you're now going into 2026 and it's his last year.
Yep.
Whereas if you're able to kind of only play him in 4 games before the playoff, you can say, okay, well, we used him. He helped us in the postseason. He could end up playing 6-7 games and still take a red shirt because the postseason doesn't count. He could end up playing up to 8 games, depending on if Notre Dame makes the playoffs, and if they're not getting a bye. He could end up playing 8 games and still get a red shirt, which would be huge for him, and certainly big for Notre Dame, because Eli Raridan's done after this year, Kevin Bauman's done after this year, Ty Washington's done after 2026. If you're looking at it to where the next 2 years you lose Raridan and Bauman and Flanagan and Ty Washington, there's a little bit more uncertainty potentially about your tight end room going to 2027. But if you're going to 2027, you've got fifth-year Cooper Flanagan, you've got junior James Flanagan, senior Jack Larson, sophomore Ian Premer, and Preston Frizel. All right, now you're like, okay, this tight end room is going to be nasty. So, yeah it'd be good.
Absolutely. And then the last question that we have kind of goes back to a conversation we had in the second segment of the show, but who's the run blockers going to be?
Yeah.
This tight end room has a diversity in talent and size, but one thing that they have a lot in common is there are really good pass catchers in this unit. Between Eli Raridan, Jack Larson, Ty Washington, we talked about some of like the size disadvantages between Henry Garrity and Justin Fisher. So that kind of whittles down to 2 people that have kind of bigger question marks. You have Kevin Bauman, and what Brian's point was is how much can you truly put on his plate in a 6-year senior that has a very riddled injury history, but then also how much can you put on the plate of a true freshman?
Right.
He will be very physically ready to play, but he's going to be drinking out of a fire hose, especially because he wasn't an early enrollee.
And then Eli Raridan get back to kind of being more of a dual threat guy. I mean, like there are times I saw Eli blocked very well, and then times he was just kind of
Yeah.
And when he wasn't blocking well, it was never about effort. It was about, okay, you took too high of an angle, you took too low of an angle, you stopped your feet, you came out of your stance too high. They were always technical things, or at times maybe he looked like he wasn't quite sure what he's supposed to do. He's a good blocker, but he can be an even better blocker, and that's all part of the getting him back healthy and in focus. But if Bauman stays healthy, and if Bauman stays healthy, James Flanagan stays healthy, then I feel a lot better about the potential of your blockers. But as you said, one guy's a true freshman, the other guy is, a guy with a very checkered past when it comes to injuries. You start saying like, boy, there's some uncertainty there. And how good can Kevin Bauman be as a blocker? I think that still remains to be seen as well, because he has lost some, at least basically the Kevin Bauman we saw last year has lost a little bit of that power, that lower body power, because of all the injuries he's had in his lower body. So is that just kind of where he was last year, coming off of an injury the year before, or is that just his new normal? That remains to be seen. And like with James Flanagan, like there's some things I know he can do, but can he do it for 40 snaps a game? That we don't know. And so that's why that's a bit of a question mark. I know who the candidates are, but who steps up and says, okay, I'm gonna do this and do this at a high level? Because I'll say one thing for sure. Tight end run blocking has to be a lot better than it was last year.
100%.
A lot better than it was last year.
100%. It goes back to the conversation that we had earlier today is what is the floor of this group in every aspect, as pass catchers, as run blockers, as a unit? It's definitely an interesting question, which kind of leads us into what does a successful season look like for this group? And Bryan, when you talk about at the end of the year, it kind of goes back to the number one question that we had. When I look at this group, a successful season one starts out as everybody comes away healthy. And I know that might be.
Or it's limited to just one guy has some issues and it's not Eli Raridan.
Agreed.
You can survive one guy having some woes.
Agreed. And look, it's a long season. There's going to be bumps and bruises and people are going to be banged up. If there's some tight ends week in and week out that have like a Cooper Flanagan type of like ankle roll.
Right. That's going to happen. That's going to happen.
That's fine. But it can't be these plagued season ending injuries.
And that's been the issue. Eli goes down with a season ending injury. Kevin Bauman has multiple. Mitchell Evans has one. That's it's not, oh shoot, Jack Larson missed the Boise game because he rolled his ankle the week before. That you can survive. It's the ones where you're going into the first round playoff game and you got two healthy tight ends, like and one's a true freshman. I mean, that's what you want to avoid.
Yeah,
and then of course the biggest one being Eli.
Yep, absolutely. That is the first piece to a successful season for me, which will then tie into my second point. If everybody's healthy, this needs to be a more effective unit down the field. Last season, yards per catch was not there. They were not effective. They were used very similar to how Riley utilized his tight ends at Duke. They were check down options. They weren't really an effective weapon.
They had to be designed to get the ball down the field. It wasn't he was coming back to them down the field.
Exactly.
They had to be the primary down the field target. And when they were, they made plays. But he was never like coming to them like you're reading this and I'm finding the tight end on the backside over. Mm-hmm. It was rarely ever that.
Yep. And it's going to be something very easy to track for somebody that loves to track stats. You go back and you look. Mitchell Evans had 9.8 yards per catch last season as Notre Dame's tight end one. That is by far the lowest output, really since 2018 when, I think Cole Kmet and Alize Mack, they were both at 10 yards per catch. One was at 10.8. But you go back and look, Evans in 23 was 14.6. Mayer was always in the double digits with his final season in 22 being 12.1 yards per catch. Cole Kmet in 2019 was at 12 yards a catch. And then Durham Smythe in his 2 years is kind of the go-to guy. In 17, he was 16.3 yards per catch. And then in 16, limited snaps, but 12.4 yards per catch. They need to be a much more effective group down the field. And with the skill set in these rooms, I'm confident they'll get there.
You just think back to some of the plays that we remember Durham Smythe making. And this is what we were missing from the tight end room last year. I think of two particular plays. One is against NC State in 2017, where they ran an all verts concept with Durham Smythe, I believe, was the number 3 to the field side. He runs a backside seam. Brandon hits him right in that backside seam for a big gain. Then there's the Michigan State game that same season where, once again, Durham's running a seam. And Brandon throws it over the linebacker in front of the safety. Durham makes a great catch, gets drilled by the safety, sets up another touchdown. And you didn't have that kind of vertical threat from the tight end room last year. You just didn't have it. Eli Raridan is certainly that kind of player. And so, that's something that, and I broke that when I did some breakdowns last year of Mike Denbrock's offense, I had some clips of their tight ends working the seams, going in motion, working the seams and stretching the field. You want to see that and from this group. And then also, they're going to do some stuff in the screen game. And that's not me sharing secrets. I'm basing this off of what Mike Denbrock did at Cincinnati and especially LSU. And they tried to do last year, but Riley couldn't throw it. It was the darndest thing. Riley Leonard could not read or throw a tight end wide under screen. It was the wildest thing. For all the great things that Riley Leonard did last year, he could not read or throw that throw. So Mike Denbrock basically scrapped it. I think that'll be back this year because Eli Raridan is the type of player that can make plays on that type of throw. Jack Larson's that kind of guy. Ty Washington is that kind of guy that can make plays on that. And then also, James Flanagan is a guy that can make plays on that type of play. So, sometimes those only go for 2 or 3, but sometimes those are going to go for 30. because it's meant to be a play where you're reading it, and if they crash down, you're pulling it, and your quarterback and your tight end are getting outside, and a lot of times you're going to have an open field with one defender with a blocker plus your tight end. And so I think we'll see that, and that's going to create some more opportunities. I think we'll see some more slot fades this year to the tight ends maybe than we saw last year, especially in the red zone. So I think we'll see that, and I agree with you. I think that is going to be something that I think constitutes a successful season from the tight ends for me. I mean, I think you nailed it, Trevor. It's about health. It's about being more effective down the field. It's about being more dependable. Not just answering the bell health-wise, but just one of the things, and this is where I'll defend Riley a little bit, it's hard to really feel comfortable throwing to your tight end all the time when you don't know what kind of effort your tight end is going to give from snap to snap, which was an issue last year for Notre Dame at the tight end position for a big chunk of the year. It's like, okay, he was open the last time, but then when I looked for him this time, he was running half speed and didn't have no urgency whatsoever, and he's thinking he's open because he's turning and he's getting open. Like, look, I'm wide open, throw me the ball. Like, yeah, it took you 8 minutes to get there, so by the time you got open, I was already off doing something else or getting chased. And so I think that's part of it too. So playing with greater urgency this year and just playing with a little bit more fire is something also that I want to see from this group. But then the final piece for me, Trevor, it's reiterating what we talked about a minute ago. This group has to play better in the run game, more consistently effective in the run game. And that's where I think that's an area where I'm actually expecting the biggest jump this year, because I think when you look at Mike Denbrock and Harris Bibbin and the things that they focus on this spring, you could see them putting a concerted effort into working those double teams, working the drive blocks, being more effective there. And that's why we saw that double team we saw on the first drive of the Blue Gold game, where they're working on the end. It's Kevin and Eli. Luke Talich comes down. I talked about earlier. Then perfect timing. I think it was Eli comes off at the perfect moment, takes Luke Talich, drives him inside, opens up that hole right in between the two tight ends for a big gain for Janarian Price. I think we're going to see more of that. And I'm expecting this to be a much better season. But like a successful season is good health overall, more impact production from the tight ends, more red zone production from the tight ends, I think is also very important. And we talk a lot about the replacing Mitchell Evans, but there were some things that Jaden Thomas did last year that they did with him because they didn't have tight ends that they felt could maybe do some of that stuff. And I think that will also go to the tight ends this year too. So just more overall production, but more big play, more clutch production than what we saw last season. And then just more consistency. It was a lot of this last season with the tight ends, especially the starting tight end. I just feel like this group is going to be a little bit hungry, and I think they're going to have quarterbacks that are going to be more prone to throwing the ball. And look, tight ends are human too. I want the ball, and if I'm going to keep running all these routes and I'm not getting the ball, eventually I'm going to be like, forget this. I got to save my energy for the blocking play next play. You know what I mean? So I think if the young tight ends are able to or the young quarterbacks are able to kind of show the tight end some love early in the season, I think that'll help them too. And honestly, when you've got a young quarterback, an effective tight end can be a great asset to him. Option routes, quick game, third down, screen stuff, where, hey, you know what, man, I'm not sure what my read is here, but here's what I know. They got a 5'11" safety on a 6'7" tight end in man coverage. You know what? Screw it. I'm not reading it. I'm just throwing it up to that guy. You know what I mean? And I bring that up because we're about to break down a team here in a minute whose starting safeties are, I believe, 5'9" and 5'11". Yes, they're Ronnie Royals 5'9", 185. No, I was wrong. They're not 5'9" and 5'11". They're 5'9" and 5'10". They're two projected starting safeties. Their corners are 5'11" and 5'11". So they do have one guy off the bench. It's a couple guys off the bench that are tall, but they're not starters right now. So those are some matchups. You say, look, I just know. Here's what I know. I look out 6'7" versus 5'10" with no safety help. I'm throwing it there. And I think that's something that can be a great asset to young quarterbacks if the tight ends earn that trust in that respect. And that's, to me, what will constitute a good season for the tight end room.
Well, let's tie a bow on the tight ends, Bryan, and let's talk some bold predictions. So these bold predictions are meant to be fun, but they also have to have some shred of
be realistic, right?
Yeah,
right.
it's as much as I love tight ends, I'm not going to predict Eli Raridan to go for 1,000 receiving yards this season.
Right. I predict Eli Raridan is going to have more catches, more yards, and more touchdowns than Tyler Warren. Like, okay.
Yeah, but
no, he's not. You know what I mean? Like,
love where the heart's at.
No.
But they do have to be somewhat bold.
Yeah.
You know, and so when I think about what this tight end room can do, my bold prediction is for an individual player, and it's for Eli Raridan. I've been pretty consistent this offseason talking about his journey, his play style. It resembles a lot of Cole Kmet's journey to me as a starting tight end at Notre Dame. In 2018, Cole Kmet didn't do a whole lot. I believe he had, we just talked about his numbers earlier, 15 catches for 162 yards, no touchdowns in 2018. Then in 2019, when he stepped up into that role, 43 catches, 515 yards, 6 touchdowns, averaged 12 yards per catch. And he did that in 11 games.
Right, because he missed the first 2 games because we were actually at the practice. He was having a monster start to camp, first 2-3 days. And he makes a diving catch, I think it was in the end zone, and he gets landed on his, I think it was his clavicle or collarbone. We watched him walk him to the tent, and then he missed the first 2 games. So he didn't play against Louisville or New Mexico. He comes back against Georgia, and he goes for 9 catches and 108 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah. I think he's going to be used vertically and in the red zone, very similar to Cole Kmet. But again, he did it over 11 games pretty much. And so when I projected a little bit some of what his stats were going to be and took a little bit of graces because I also factored in they're going to have Malachi Fields as Jaden Greathouse. But I think Eli Raridan this season, he's going to end the year with 53 catches, around above 50 catches, around 600 yards receiving, and have 8 receiving touchdowns this year. And to some, that might not sound like a bold prediction. It's still not the Michael Mayer status because Eli Raridan is not going to be the go-to target in this offense like Michael Mayer was in 2022.
We won't need to be. I think he could.
Yeah.
I don't think they need him to be that.
And these stats are also across 15 games. And so that's my bold prediction. And then on top of that, I think that Eli Raridan is going to have the highest yards per catch of a Notre Dame tight end since Durham Smythe went for 16.3 yards per catch in 2017.
I dig it. So do you have any unit predictions, or was that your only?
That was my one. Yeah.
I have 2 bold predictions. You ready for mine? Okay. Here's my bold prediction. I'm going to make a group prediction first. The Notre Dame tight ends as a unit will have at least 70 catches. This is for the course of the entire season. At least 70 catches and at least 900 yards. So as a unit, they will put up that production this season. Now, I'm predicting part of that bold prediction, and this might be the boldest part, is that they stay healthy. And the reason I say that is because I number one, I think Eli Raridan is going to have a breakout season. I've talked about this. I think he's going to have a breakout season. This isn't new. But I also think that Jack Larson is going to be a factor this year and have like a Cole Kmet 2018 type of season. 15, 16, 17 catches, 175 to 200 yards type of season. And then, after that, you've got, you'll see a little bit from Ty Washington, a couple catches from Kevin Bauman. Maybe he goes like 5 for 60. James Flanagan catches 7-8 passes. So I think they're going to catch at least 70 passes and have over 900 yards this season from the tight end room. And if you really want to get bold, they're as a unit going to catch at least 10 touchdowns as a group. That's my bold prediction for the unit. So 70 catches, 900 yards, 10 touchdowns are the minimums for the tight end room this season. Now 900 catches or 900 catches, 900 yards on 70 catches gets them to about 12.9 per catch. So that is kind of getting to where you're talking about. We're on the same page there. I think the overall yards per catch number, that's 12.9. That includes me thinking that guys like Kevin Bauman as James Flanagan are going to have a little lower yards per catch, especially Kevin Bauman in this season. But that's my prediction there. My other prediction, my individual prediction is, it's not a number, but Eli Raridan, if healthy, is going to do one of 2 things, if not both. He will at least be a second or third team All-American and or a finalist for the John Mackey Award.
Love that. Love those predictions.
If not both. So that's that's bold for a guy that's got 16 career catches.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's also in line with what we've seen from Notre Dame in the past.
Well, and that's what's been interesting about coming up with what my bold predictions were for this unit is because it kind of has to be tampered down to what this unit has coming back and also a combination of what Notre Dame tight ends have done before in the past when given their opportunity. So, no, I love those bold predictions. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for the tight end portion of today's show.
I just want to say something real quick. People talking about that's a lot of catches. It's not really. 70 catches in 15 games is 4.6 catches per game. That's it. And 900 yards in 15 games, because we're going off of that, is only 60 yards. That's 5 catches for 60 yards a game. That's not a lot. That's not a lot. There's going to be games that catch 40, some games that catch 80. That's not. We're not talking about in the regular season. For the season.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
And if it's 16 games, if they play 16 games, that's only 4.4 catches per game.
Across the room.
Right.
Like not just one guy.
Exactly. If it's 16 games, that's only 56.3 yards per game. That's not that much.
And with how we believe they could be utilized, that could be on one catch.
That's true. And again, if Notre Dame averages 15, let's say Notre Dame only averages 250 yards a game receiving. Let's just say that. So 250 yards a game in the course of 15 games gets Notre Dame to 3,750 yards. If you take out 900 yards, that's still 2,850 yards that have to get spread around the rest of the groups. So if you say 500 of that goes to the running backs, that's still over 2,300 yards that has to then get split up to the wide receivers. If you do math and you actually think outside the box and not just, well, they're going to throw 195 passes to Jaden Greathouse and Malachi Fields, each, then you realize it's actually not that much production. It's what the tight ends at Notre Dame should be doing, no matter who's a tight end. So, yes, and you can point to past seasons and point that out. I mean, if you go back to the 2018 season, or it was to be the 2019 season, I mean, Cole Kmet, so he played 11 games that year. He caught, 43 passes? Yep. Cole Kmet caught, 43 divided by 11 times 15. If you'd have played 15 games that year, Cole Kmet has 59 catches by himself. Keep in mind that year, Tommy Tremble also caught 16 passes that year. I bring that up because Chase Claypool had a 1,000-yard season that year. And you also had Chris Fink, Javon McKinley, Braden Lindsey also all went over 200 yards that year. So, and that team and that offense that year averaged 252 passing yards a game. That was in 13 games. Mm-hmm. Add 2 to 3 more games. It's not that much more.
Yeah.
That's what a good tight end room at Notre Dame should do. So that's my prediction on it.
Well, I love it. Love bold predictions. Folks, that's going to do it for the tight end portion of today's show. But don't go anywhere. We are getting ready to break down NC State, Notre Dame's 6th opponent of the year. But before we get there, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. Anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards, boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Bryan, it is time to preview another Notre Dame opponent. This is their 6th opponent on the schedule in 2025. It is the NC State Wolfpack. Now, they are hosting NC State, I believe, on October 11th.
Yep.
Inside of Notre Dame Stadium, 3:30 p.m. kickoff. This is a game right before they host USC. This is right in the middle of a 3-game homestead for Notre Dame. They go Boise State, NC State, and then USC. So this is smack dab in the middle. One of the big reasons why a lot of people believe, us included, this to be Notre Dame's trap game of the season. This is a quality opponent that we will be diving into who they have on offense and defense. But this is also an interesting year for Dave Dorn. But all things that we're going to break down here soon. This is game number 5 in the series between Notre Dame and NC State, and they're split. They're dead even. It is 2-2 all time. NC State won the first 2 in 2003, and then in the middle of a monsoon in 2016. I'm hoping that if it's more rainy, inclement weather on October 11th.
I got a feeling Mike Denbrock and as I've said before, Mike Denbrock was not the driver behind that many passes in 2015. I'll just leave it at that. But I'm pretty sure that Marcus Freeman's not going to have them throwing in the middle of a monsoon in South Bend, Indiana.
I would say that's a fairly safe take. Yeah. I'd say that's fairly safe. But Notre Dame has won the last two matchups, once in 2017, and then they also won in 2023. Also inclement weather that game in 2023. They had to there was a rain delay. They had to go back to the locker room, and then first play out of the locker room, Audric Estime takes it 75 yards to the crib. So this is their first matchup since 2023, and it will be inside of Notre Dame Stadium. So, Bryan, NC State, interesting opponent this year because we believe this to be Notre Dame's trap game.
It is, because a trap game is a team that in my opinion, has talent. They do. Has a dynamic quarterback. They have that. And as a team that has a track record of winning games like this, which against Notre Dame, they do. This is a very interesting opponent and a very big year for Dave Doeren. I think that's when you start talking about this matchup and you start looking at what we're expecting from NC State this year. Look, I think there's a lot of pressure on Dave Doeren. And I think some of the changes he made last year from his coaching staff, obviously Tony Gibson was not a change he made. Tony Gibson left and became the head coach, I believe, at Marshall. I think is where Tony Gibson left to, longtime defensive coordinator. Had a bit of a rough year last year, but a guy that I have a lot of respect for as a defensive coordinator for what he did at West Virginia and then obviously at NC State. But he also got rid of Robert Anae, and he brought in Kurt Roper as your new offensive coordinator. So he's making those moves that a coach on the hot seat starts making, kind of putting the blame on some other people. Or I shouldn't say it like that. But just look, things have to change or we're not going to be around anymore. I mean, Dave Doeren's been at NC State since 2013, and you're going to see about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You're going into your 14th season, and just the inconsistency that the program has had has been a little bit frustrating. Prior to last season when they went 6-7, they'd won at least 8 games 4 years in a row. Then in 2019 they went 4-8, and then the 2 years before that they were 9-4, and then the 3 years before that they were 7-6, 7-6, 8-5. So he has them going to bowl games all the time. Since 2014, his second year, they've been in a bowl game every year but 2019. They've lost their last 5 bowl games they've played. They had one canceled in 2021 because of COVID craziness. But when you look at Dave Doeren, it's kind of like you've just been kind of hunkering around that 8-9 win mark, and then you take a big step last year. Every year that you're expecting them to take a jump, they end up having some very disappointing losses in games. You're just like, dude, how do you lose to that team? You go, for example, you go look at 2023 when the year Notre Dame beat them, and you've got that game against Louisville at home and you lose 10-13. You go on the road and you lose to Duke, and then then you go on a run, and it's just kind of like just the lack of just taking that step and really becoming that guy. And you've seen seasons where you go into the year with high expectations. 2022, they go into the season preseason ranked number 13. They beat ECU by a point. They beat Charleston Southern. They beat Texas Tech. They beat UConn. And then Clemson beats them in a somewhat competitive game. They win against Florida State. Then they go at Syracuse and get smacked around. And they drop to 24. Then they beat Virginia Tech. They beat Wake Forest. And then they lose back-to-back games to Boston College at home and then Louisville. And you're just like, how does that happen? Those teams weren't even good. I mean, that was an 8-5 Syracuse team. That was a 3-9 BC team. He lost at home to a 3-9 BC team. And then they beat North Carolina in overtime and then lose a bowl game to Maryland. And you're like, how did that team lose 5 games? And I think that's the frustration that people have with Dave Doeren. I know it's certainly the frustration I have with Dave Doeren, because the year before they're preseason unranked and they finished the year, ranked 19th in the coaches poll, 20th in the AP poll, and had some pretty good wins that year. So you beat number 9 Clemson that year, if you remember that one, in 2021. And then you're like, how do you then lose to Mississippi State by 2 touchdowns? How do you lose to Miami? How do you lose to Wake Forest? And they're just a really maddening team because they have talent, and every year they have talent, and every year you're kind of waiting on them. Is this the year that they finally figure it out and they finally take that charge and become one of those top programs in the ACC, and they just never quite get there. And after 14 years, you kind of got to start asking yourself, are they going to get there under him? And it's time for him to do that. I mean, you go back to that 2017 team that Notre Dame played, their entire starting D-line got drafted in the first 4 rounds or better, including the number 5 overall pick. They had Jermaine Pratt at middle linebacker. That team had a lot of NFL talent. If you go back and look at the NFL draft that year, they had 7 guys from that 2017 team get drafted in the 5th round or higher. 7 guys. And then the next year, they had 4 more guys get drafted, including another 1st, 3rd, and a 4th. And then you ask yourself, okay, that's all great. How did you lose to South Carolina? How did you lose to Wake Forest? We get losing to Notre Dame and Clemson. Those were 2 really good football teams. But how did you lose to a Wake Forest who went 8-5 that year? You know, like how did you lose to South Carolina who went, and they were 9-4. They were an okay team, but they weren't great. They got beat by Kentucky by 10 points 2 weeks later. And it's just the inability with these really talented rosters to kind of take this team over the hump. And if you remember that 2017 NC State team had also had Ryan Finley at quarterback, I believe, who was a pretty good quarterback. So it's just that inability to kind of take the next hump, which is what can get frustrating with Dave Doran. But then the flip side is, but the guy's taking you to a bowl game every year. So I guess my question would be for NC State fans is, what's your standard? Like, what's the expectation? Are you comfortable with just it's 8-9 wins every year, and then every 6 or 7 years, 4 or 5 years, he has a down year, and then they bounce back? I think he's got to get back to winning 8-9 games again this year to kind of say, okay, we're okay with this. We're okay with this mediocrity. But what's going to happen is every time you have that down year at 6 and 7, the same questions kind of pop up again. And the last thing you can do, and he hasn't done since his first 3 years, is have those back-to-back down years. That's what he has to avoid. He has to really work hard to avoid that because this past year, Trev, there was high expectations. I mean, some people had NC State in their top 25 preseason, and you know they actually AP had him in the top.
I was 25. Just about to say, yeah,
preseason number 24, and then you go out in week 2 and get destroyed by Tennessee. You get destroyed by NC State. You lose at home to a 4-8 Wake Forest team. You lose at home to Syracuse. You lose at home to Duke by 10. You lose at Georgia Tech, and then of course you lose to East Carolina in one of the most improbable ends to a game I've ever seen. Did you see the end of that game, Trev? It was 3rd and 10 with like a minute some left. 3rd and 10. In East Carolina runs a draw just trying to get into a manageable 4th down, and he houses it like 70-something yards. You're like, how do you lose that game?
Yep.
You know, and it's just things like that that you're just like, you should be better than this at NC State. Like you should be better than this, in my opinion. And they just haven't been able to climb over that hump. So this is a bigger. He's got to get back to 8-9 wins again this year. He has to kind of fend it off. And honestly, they should, because I really like the roster, especially on offense, that they've got this season. Like, we're going to dive into the offense and the defense, but this is a dangerous offense, and that's why when you look at it from their schedule and you look at games like against Notre Dame and Miami and Florida State, and this is a team that you better be careful you don't overlook, because there's some weapons on offense, and they've got a quarterback that can make your life heck if you're a defensive coordinator, if you're a defensive player. And we'll talk more about that here in a minute. But that's the big thing, Trev, is you've got to turn this thing around, and you've got to get back to minimum 8 wins this year. Regular season, I'm talking about. You got it. And when we look over the schedule, as we talk about expectations, there's some tough games here to look at. Obviously, at Notre Dame on October 11th, you've got at Duke on September 20th. That won't be an easy game. Virginia Tech at home won't be an easy game. At Pitt won't be easy. Home against Georgia Tech won't be easy. At Miami won't be easy. But Florida State, North Carolina at home won't be easy. But with all due respect, outside of Notre Dame and Pitt, most of your tough opponents are at home. Miami, you get Florida State at home, you get North Carolina at home, you get Georgia Tech at home, you get Virginia Tech at home, you get Virginia at home, you get ECU at home. Like, I think this is, when you talk about expectations, if you can't go 8-4 at least against this schedule, then I just think you've taken the program as far as you can take it. And then your leadership of the school has to decide, are we okay being a 7 to 8 win team every year? That's the question you have to ask yourself.
Well, I think a lot of it too goes back to, you look at some of their results from last season, and I know that the teams that are on their 25 schedule doesn't really do this conversation justice. But when you do lose, look, I don't believe the expectation at NC State is to be like an 11-1 football team, just current state under Dave Doeren going into year 14. But in some of your losses, just have them be more competitive. That was a lot of the issue with them last season. Were some of the blowouts. Now, there were some close ones, but what's telling about NC State is in the same season that they lose 51-10 to Tennessee and 59-35 against Clemson on the road, they also had a very hard-fought game against Georgia Tech, 30-29. That's the type of, against a very high-powered Syracuse offense, held to 24 points and only lost by a touchdown. So that's this.
I mean, Trev, they beat Northern Illinois last year.
I mean, yeah,
something in a hard-fought game, something Notre Dame couldn't do last season. I mean, how do you lose at home to Wake Forest, who goes 4-8, but then you go on the road and beat Cal? And then you blow out Stanford, and then you beat North Carolina on the road. How do you do that and then lose at home to Wake Forest?
Yeah,
but that like to your point though, that's kind of been his MO. I mean, in 2023, they beat Clemson 24-17, beat Miami the next week, beat Virginia Tech on the road, and then. What did that team also do? Lost at Duke by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Lost at home to Louisville. Got beat by K-State in a bowl game. It's just that, dude, why are you losing that game? Like, I get you losing that game, but why are you losing that game? And that's the frustrating part about it. And that's what he's got to fix. And there's some great big win opportunities for this NC State team this year. There are program narrative changing opportunities on the schedule. I mean, you've got Notre Dame, Miami, and Florida State. If you can somehow go 2-3 against that group without having any, how the heck did you lose that game? All of a sudden you're a 9-3 team. Maybe because if you're 9-3 with a loss to Notre Dame, most likely that means you're in contention for an ACC title game bid, which means you've got a shot to maybe upset Clemson and get to the playoffs. I mean, they are an outside ACC title contender for me this year, Trev. That's what their roster should tell you, and their schedule should tell you. I just don't know if Dave Doeren's capable of pulling that off. Well, that's the big question.
And here's the difficult part about NC State's schedule. When they travel to Notre Dame on October 11th, would it surprise me at all if they were 4-2 against the schedule? No, it wouldn't. But then would it also surprise me if they were 3-3 or at worst 2-4? That also wouldn't surprise me. That's the margin for error for them. What they run the risk of is kind of being in that middle, like 3-3 by the time they travel up to Notre Dame before their first bye week. And Notre Dame runs them. And then you have a bye week. And then after that, it is an uphill battle until you get to the tail end of your schedule. And we don't know how good Florida State could be a 9-win team this year for all we know.
Trev, if they've got 2 or more losses coming out of that first bye week, that's going to be tough for them to it's going to be tough.
Yeah. And look,
especially if you have more than 2, to your point, if you have more than 2 losses, like let's say you lose at Duke and at Notre Dame, but then you get upset at home by like Virginia Tech or something like that. It's going to make for a very long year.
Yep.
Very long year.
And depending on the manner that you lose on the road to Notre Dame, like it has the potential for the wheels kind of come off again and you go 6-7. Or you end the year 6 at best with the tail end of the schedule. I'm high on Pitt. You come out of you have at Notre Dame, bye week at Pitt. That's
home against Georgia Tech, right?
And then you go home against Georgia Tech, another bye, and then out of your bye week, you're on the road against Miami. Like this has the makings, to your point, of it could either be like, hey, this is a really impressive 8-4 type schedule, maybe 9-3, depending on how their talented roster is coached up, or it could be something to where they're looking down the barrel at 5-7 and they're on the verge of being not bowl eligible.
You say that, Trevor, and it's kind of crazy to think about, but that's the range. NC State this year for me has the range of big disappointment that barely gets into a bowl game, or they're playing for the ACC title. I truly believe they have that kind of range this season. And part of it's they're young in some spots, and then you've got 2 first-year coordinators, and there's enough question marks, and the schedule's tough enough to where you could see a disappointing season where they end 5-7, 6-6. But I could also see a season because of the quarterback and some of the talent they have where if the coaching is good and the leadership of the team is good, they're going into that last stretch of 3 games saying, if we run the table here, we're clinching a spot in the ACC title game, but we have a shot to still even get in there 2-1. Like, that's what kind of team they have. And that's what makes them dangerous.
It's starting to kind of get the makings of the expectations were a little bit lower. Last year they had Grayson McCall was their quarterback last season.
Yeah, they got him from Coastal out of the portal. It didn't work out for them. And they tried Brendan Armstrong the year before that from UVA. They've struggled to develop their own quarterback. I mean, for a while. And Ryan Finley, they got from Boise.
Yeah.
Like, so they've really had to rely a lot on portal quarterbacks. And that's kind of kept them down.
But this year kind of has the makings of that 8-9 win Dave Doran type of season. Look, you got 2 first-year coordinators. On offense, you have Kurt Roper, and then their new defensive coordinators, DJ Elliott, who's, he has a lot of experience as a defensive coordinator at the FBS level. Spent some time in the NFL as well, I believe as a linebackers coach with the Eagles. But, you go and you think about that. They have a younger quarterback in CJ Bailey taking over, a homegrown kid, I believe, finally kind of ending their streak of transfer.
Well, he's a true freshman last year for them.
Yeah. And so this kind of has the makings that, like, they're not going to start the season ranked in the top 25.
No.
But this kind of has the makings of, okay, I mean, all of the seasons that NC State has finished the year ranked, they started the year unranked.
That's been his thing. When they start ranked, they disappoint.
Mm-hmm.
Start unranked, they end up being a lot better than people think they're going to be.
Yep.
That's been the maddening thing about Dave Doran coach football teams. It's not true in every single season, but in a lot of years, that's kind of been the storyline with his football teams. And it's just, it can be frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, actually at NC State, I mean, really throughout in 2017, they started the year unranked. They got all the way up to 14th, finished the year 23rd, and then in 2022, they started the year 13th. They got up all the way up to 10th, finished the year unranked. 2023, they started unranked, got all the way up to 19th, finished the year 21st. And last season, they started 24th. Their highest was 24th, and then they finished the year unranked. And so that's interesting. That is really interesting with him. And so kind of has the makings of that type of year. But, when you look at this group overall, it's kind of hard to put expectations on 2025 because their margin for wins, losses is so big, Brian.
It is. And let's kind of dive into this, Trev, and kind of talk about the offense because this is the unit ultimately that I'm hanging my hat on if I'm an NC State fan. This is the unit that's going to fuel you to success. The numbers last year, you see them, they're not overly impressive. The numbers are not sexy. 61st in the country in scoring, 75th in total offense, 46th in yards per play isn't bad. You talk about them going 83rd in rushing yards. They are last season 58th in passing yards. It's like, well, we don't run it very well, but at least we don't throw it very well either when you just look at the raw numbers. But if you really break down the film, I like, here's the thing that's weird. I broke down when I was breaking down NC State this offseason. I watched a couple games and I just so happened to pick the right games, so I'm breaking them down and I know they got destroyed by Clemson. I watched them play that game, but I'm breaking down the Stanford game because obviously they play Stanford. I'm breaking down the Georgia Tech game, the North Carolina game, and a little bit of the Wake game. And I'm like, dude, this offense is really good. And then you go break down like the Tennessee game and you break down the Clemson game and you break down the Duke game and you're like, dude, this offense is really bad. And you just kind of wonder, like, how do they become that big of a gap from week to week? But if you really go look at them when they were on last year, they were a pretty good football team. They had a 527-yard performance against Stanford. They had a 522-yard performance against Western Carolina, 462 against North Carolina, 419 against Wake, 436 against Clemson, 411 against Syracuse, 400 against Georgia Tech. Then they went for 143 against Tennessee, 171 against Northern Illinois, 268 against Duke. It was just that inconsistency. But they were also young and dealt with a lot of injuries. And Kevin Concepcion was not 100% last year. You had obviously the issues of quarterback. When your starting quarterback eventually goes down, you're putting a true freshman on the field. You start to understand why they were an inconsistent unit. But coming into 2025, I think this offense has a chance to be way more dangerous than those numbers would otherwise represent, Trev, because I do think this is a team that has talent and a talented skill positions, which again, from a Notre Dame standpoint, and I'm not trying, I mean, this is an NC State preview, but looking at it from a Notre Dame standpoint, if you're Notre Dame, that's the thing that concerns you a little bit, because they do have the kind of athletes that can turn mistakes into big plays. And that's the recipe for a team that can upset people. And that's what makes NC State dangerous against Notre Dame, against Miami, against Duke, against Virginia Tech, against Pitt, against all those teams. Because you make one mistake against Hollywood Smothers and he can take to the house. You make one mistake in coverage against Noah Rogers, you may not even make a mistake in coverage, and Noah Rogers is better than you. I mean, and they've got one of the best tight ends in college football coming back in Justin Jolly. So, like, when you look at this with this NC State offense, Trev, from a skill player standpoint, this is a very dangerous football team. And if the coaching can kind of live up to the talent, there's no reason that this group right here can't be part of a mid-35 or mid-30 or higher points per game team under Kurt Roper, who's been at NC State for a while, been an OC in the past. But Noah Rogers, Wesley Grimes, Keenan Anderson, Terrell Anderson was a good rotation player last year. Hollywood Smothers is a legit ACC back, like a legit 1,000-yard caliber back. And then, like I said, Justin Jolly's an absolute stud. I mean, he is a really good football player. 43 catches for 661 yards last year, 4 touchdowns. Noah Rogers is a redshirt freshman. He transferred from Ohio State, had 35 catches for 478 yards and a touchdown. That he is a legit big-time player. Like, Noah Rogers or at least has the tools to be a legit big-time player. It would not shock me if Noah Rogers breaks out and is one of the 5 or 6 best receivers in the ACC this year. Would not shock me at all. And then Wesley Grimes, a veteran player that's played a lot of football and had some success in his career. You know, had 24 catches for 319 yards last year, had 20 for 339 the year before that. You know, so they also have some guys they lost. They lost, obviously, as we mentioned, Casey Concepcion, Dakari Collins transferred, but there's plenty of talent coming back in the receiving corps last year. You had 2 freshmen that are in the 2 deep now. Terrell Anderson had 14 catches last year. Keenan Jackson had 12 catches for 124 yards last year. So there's plenty of talent for this football team to go out there and have success, on top of having one of the best tight ends in college football, Trev. But at the end of the day, this team's going to go as far as C.J. Bailey can take it.
That was going to be my next question to you, Bryan. You've been very consistent this offseason about how high you are in C.J. Bailey. Yeah. Big old 6'6", 210-pound quarterback. He came in when Grayson McCall stepped away from football because the injuries just started to stack up too much for him. And he came in as a true freshman, but his ability as a runner and a passer, as a real potential threat to this offense, is kind of what ties all of this together for you. Very high on the skilled positions, as am I. Noah Rogers, I think, could have a very, very good season this year. Look, Justin Jolly and Noah Rogers were putting up those numbers last year with inconsistent quarterback play. It's impressive. It's really, really impressive. But the guy that kind of ties this all together for you is C.J. Bailey.
He is. And, I mean, you look at him, Trev, he's 6'6". He's got a pretty live arm. True freshman last year, not a redshirt freshman. He was a true freshman last year. Comes in, doesn't play the first, or at least doesn't throw a ball the first 2 games, comes off his first game against Louisiana Tech, does okay, struggles a little bit. He has some really impressive moments against Clemson. Like, he entered the game, it was over. I mean, the game was out of hand by the time he got on. I mean, I forget what let me pull it up here quick, but if I remember correctly, Clemson was almost up, I think, like 30 or something like that at halftime of that game. I mean, it was like the final score was 59-35. Yeah. It was not that close. It wasn't anywhere close to being that close. It was 45-7 at halftime. And C.J. Bailey in the second half started to get hot. They scored 28 points on Clemson in the second half. Now, part of that was the game was in doubt and Clemson wasn't as locked in, but part of that was C.J. Bailey. That was when the light went on a little bit for C.J. Bailey. And when he kind of started to figure some things out, Trev, that team all of a sudden started, and he actually did start that game. But when second half, the light went on and he just started to look like a different player. And you could see him every week just getting more and more confident and more effective as you kind of got to the middle of the season. The Syracuse game, he goes off in that game, throws for 306, completes. He went 18 of 20 for 234 yards and 3 touchdowns in a win over Syracuse. And as you mentioned, he's also a guy that is a threat to run the ball. That became more apparent later in the year. He didn't look comfortable like when to run, when not to run. He's more of a scrambler than a guy you're going to run in a ton of design runs for. You can run read zone with him, and you can do some design stuff. And I think the OC got a little bit more comfortable running him late in the year as well. That's why he had more touches down the stretch. He ran for 279 yards last year. That's it. And 5 touchdowns. But in his last 4 games, he went 36, 83, 54, and 24. So a big chunk of that production was in the last 4 games. I think you're going to see him be more of a dynamic scrambler this year. I think he can do some things on design runs. But the thing that makes him dangerous is not that part. It's that he is a legitimate thrower of the football. And now that he's got a year under his belt, he passed for 2,400 yards last year, averaged 8 yards an attempt, 64.9% completion rate, 17 touchdowns, 10 picks. That's not a bad 20, and then 5 rushing, 22 touchdowns and 10 picks as a true freshman in the ACC is not bad work for a kid that as raw as he is. But the talent is enormous. He's fun to watch. The team seems to kind of rally around him, and they faded a little bit down the stretch, not because of him, but now you go into year 2 with some legit weapons. And the best part about it is the weapons that we're talking about, Trev. These are not guys that are new portal guys. Hollywood Smothers, Noah Rogers, Wesley Grimes, Keenan Jackson, Terrell Anderson, Justin Holly, and Cody Hardy, all their top weapons. They're all Hollywood Smothers at running back. They all played last year at NC State. So these are kids he's got the whole offseason to work with as well. And so I think C.J. Bailey has a chance to be a breakout quarterback. I don't have my top 10 yet because he needs a lot of work. But I will not be shocked if by the end of the season people are talking about C.J. Bailey being an NFL draft pick kind of guy in the next few years. But he's fun to watch. Now, he's got to show that he can make that growth. Now that teams have film on him and they've studied him, and they're going to – because now Notre Dame's going to know what C.J. Bailey can do now in a way that Clemson didn't. So he's going to have to continue to grow, but, man, the tools are there. I mean, he in my opinion, he's got day 1, day 2 NFL draft pick physical tools. He just now has to grow as a player. But I love watching this kid play.
Now, as excited as we are and confident that we are that the skill positions are going to show out, and we're both very high on C.J. Bailey, the biggest question mark, though, relies up front with the big boys and their offensive line. That is going to be the biggest question mark for this NC State offense, and it's going to be the biggest question mark that Kurt Roper is going to have to answer too. We're talking about an offense last year that ranked 100 and where did they go? 23rd. They in tackles for loss allowed, 92 tackles for a loss for 299 yards. And then as far as sacks go, they ranked 78th in the country. They allowed 28 sacks last year in 13 games, average giving up 2.15 sacks a game. This is going to be the unit that is going to kind of hold and bounce. Will they allow NC State skilled positions to have the seasons that they're capable of having? Mm-hmm. That's going to be the biggest question mark for them.
Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, they're going to have to perform well. You can see, Trev, it's a unit that has some unique size to it in that their center and their left tackle aren't very big, but their guards and their right tackle are. They're relying on 2 transfers to start. Teague Anderson was a guy who started 18 starts at Utah State. Jalen Grant was a guy that started 39 games at Purdue, but I think was he hurt last year at Purdue? Because he didn't start for Purdue last year. I think he was hurt last year.
He was.
He's a guy with some experience, but now they're bringing it all together. And the question is going to be, okay, can they come together as a unit? Because that was one of the big issues last year that I felt watching them play. Is I thought their offensive line was a problem. That was the big issue that I thought that they had. I think the left tackle's a pretty good player. I actually like him quite a bit. The rest of their offensive line was kind of just not great last year. But, Jalen Grant's a kid who's played a lot of football at the Power 5 level and been a solid starter. Can he come back healthy and perform for them? That's going to be a very, very big question. Can Anthony Carter kind of step into, another year in the starting lineup, and can he perform better than he did last year? So those are questions. And then obviously Teague Anderson's got to make a big jump from the level he was at last year. You could argue their best offensive lineman last year outside of Jakari's Peak was Zeke Correll, who transferred in from Notre Dame. And so you're going to lose him. That's a problem. And the thing that's frustrating is there'd be games where you're like, Anthony Belton's playing well and Zeke Correll's playing well and Jakari's Peak's playing well. And you're like, boy, this offensive line is pretty good. And then they just would fall apart in the third quarter, or the next game they'd come out and they couldn't protect the quarterback, or they're giving up run throughs. It was very weird watching that unit play because they didn't necessarily lack talent. They just didn't play well together. And, now you go into the year and you've got a far less experienced group. You've got Val Erickson step into the lineup. He played 2 games last year. He started against East Carolina and he played 43 snaps against Clemson. That's 105 snaps. Only played 120 the rest of the year last year. I think was he a transfer? I think he was I forget, but he played but didn't start for them last year. So there's question marks here, Trev, but there's also some potential there. How well this unit comes together is going to tell us how good this team can be. Because if this offensive line can just play, they don't have to be world beaters. Just play good football together. Just do your job.
Consistent.
Just that's it. You've got the skill talent to take games over. Just don't allow a free rusher into CJ Bailey's face to blow the play up. Don't allow a guy to hit Hollywood Smothers before he can get downhill and start making plays. Just do your job. You don't have to dominate. Just do your job. And if they can do their job consistently, I think this offense is going to be one of the 3 or 4 best in the ACC. I really think they have that kind of skill talent on offense.
Well, let's talk a little defense here, Bryan, because we talked about what potential the offense had. The defense also under new management. DJ Elliott is coming in, and he is now the defensive coordinator for NC State. You take a look at what they did last season, and some of the numbers reflect why they had such a rough season last year.
That's rough. Yeah. I mean, Trev, 98th in scoring, 88th in yards per play, 79th in rushing yards, 93rd in passing yards. You stink at stopping the run, and you're 102nd in yards per rush. The only reason they rank 79th in rushing yards is because teams do want them all the time. Mm-hmm. But they ranked 102nd in yards allowed per rush and 132nd in most rushes of 30 yards or more. They gave up 16 runs of 30 yards or more. If you're looking at it and you're thinking about matchups against Virginia Tech and Notre Dame's backfield and Miami's backfield and Desmond Reed at Pitt and Jamal Haynes at Georgia Tech, you're thinking you better figure some things out real fast because you are playing some really good backfields this year. So, and honestly, Trev, I mean, there was too much talent to be this bad on defense last year, especially when your head coach is a defensive guy, former defensive coordinator at Wisconsin. And, Tony Gibson had done some really good things there, but last year was a really poor coaching job by him and by the entire staff. And they're going to have to get that thing turned around because otherwise they're going to lose games. Like they're going to go on the road and get beat by Miami and their offense puts up 38. They're going to lose at home to Virginia Tech and their offense scores 34. Like you can't have that. And that's what's frustrating watching them last year. I mean, you give up 34 points at home to Wake Forest. 30 points against Wake Forest last year should have been enough to beat them at home. Should have been. But then how do you give up 34 to Wake Forest and then the next week you hold Syracuse to 24? And it was maddening watching that team play. But your defense is going to have to get better. You're going to have to get – they were very undisciplined last year. Very undisciplined. Way too many mistakes. Personnel is not why you give up 16 carries of 30 yards, 16 runs of 30 yards or more. It's not because you lack talent. It's because you're not disciplined. You're blitzing exotically for just cuz. You're not executing the blitzes you need to execute. You don't give up 34 plays of 30 yards or more on the season because you lack talent. You do that because you lack discipline. Now, this year, it's going to be partly about discipline and partly about talent needing to step up. But that's the side of the ball where you understand why they went out and got a lot of portal players. They had very little portal influence on their team outside of your two offensive linemen. And I said Cody Hardy returned. He did not return. He was somewhere else last year. But the point that the rest of the skill players are. You had 5 newcomers, 5 portal guys on offense, 3 offensive linemen, 2 tight ends. That's it. You were in double figures on defense and portal pickups. And honestly, you needed it because their defense was a mess. But I think it's not just about talent. It's also about you've got to be more disciplined. And that's what DJ Elliott has to figure out. Like, look, I know Tony Gibson was a great D coordinator, had some great scheme and all that, but sometimes his teams would be inconsistent because like you're doing a little too much right now. Sometimes it's okay to just say, we got athletic kids, let's just let them go play. And they struggled to do that last year. And they're going to have to fix that.
So, Bryan, let's talk a little bit about DJ Elliott, their new defensive coordinator. He is somebody that has collegiate defensive coordinator experience dating back to Kentucky. I mean, he was their defensive coordinator from 2013 to 2016. He was also the defensive coordinator at Kansas from 19 to 20. He was the defensive coordinator at Temple in 2022. And he's also had some stints at the NFL level. Most recently, I believe he was a linebackers coach for the Philadelphia Eagles.
And I don't know if he got fired from that job. He was an analyst, I think, with like the Ravens or something like that. He wasn't a full-time, or no, he was an analyst at Baylor this year. And so I don't know if he got fired from the Eagles or what, but he was an analyst in a college team this past season, which is a little bit like, okay.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
But when you look at some of his previous stops, what are some of the forecasted changes you think he's going to bring to this defense schematically?
Well, I think that's the big question, Trev, because I don't know that I have that answer. I don't know that I didn't watch I don't know that their spring game was televised. I haven't been able to find their spring game, but I don't know what kind of changes are. The one thing from what I've read and what I've heard is, they are planning on sticking to their 3-3 alignment, which is kind of what they did last year. They're going to be a 3-down team. Last year, they would mix it up between 3 and 4, just kind of bring one of their backers down. I don't know how much they're going to do that this year. I don't know what kind of structural changes they're going to make in coverage this year. So a lot of that, Trev, is I don't know. But the thing that was a little bit of a head scratcher is, this is not a guy who's had a lot of great success as a Division I coordinator. Like with Chris Ash, you say, okay, wasn't good at Texas and then 1 year at Arkansas, but he was good at Wisconsin and he was good at Ohio State. There's at least something to kind of hang your hat on. That's not true for DJ Elliott, who also was a former D-line coach at Florida State. So his last year at Kentucky, they gave up 31.3 points per game. At Kansas, he was there in 19 and 20. He inherited a defense that gave up 30 points per game. In his first year, they went up to 36.1. And then the second year, they jumped up to 46 during the COVID year. Now, you'd like to say part of that was because of the COVID year, but they also held an opponent to 16 points in their last game. They were giving up over 50 going into that game. They gave up 38 to Coastal Carolina, 47 to Baylor, 47 to Okie State, 38 to West Virginia, 55 to K-State, 52 to Iowa State, 62 to Oklahoma, and 59 to TCU. And then understandably, he got fired. And then in 2022 at Temple, they gave up 29.3 points per game. Now, that one is interesting because in 21, they gave up 37.5, and then in 23, they gave up 35.7. But in his 1 year there, they were a touchdown better. So the track record's not great, and that's a little bit concerning for me. But, Dave Dorn is a defensive guy. He is a former very successful defensive coordinator at Wisconsin. Is this one of those things like with Mike Elko at Texas A&M, where Mike Elko is more involved in the defense? We see Brent Venables is on the hot seat at Oklahoma. He's taking the defense back over. Be very curious to see if Dave Dorn takes a more hands-on approach with the defense this year because of how much is at stake. But the track record with DJ Elliott's not great. He's going to have a career year. But I'll say this, if he can do it at NC State, what he did at Temple, which is take 5 to 6 points off the points per game average, then this defense is at least good enough to where they can still win 8-9 games minimum with the offense I think that they're going to have. And so he doesn't have to build an elite defense, Trev. You just have to be competent. If they're at 22, 23 points a game on average, they'll have a shot to go into November with a chance to play for the ACC championship, in my opinion.
Well, and that's why I feel confident about this NC State team, because a lot of the conversations that we're having around the bigger question marks on their team is they don't have to play lights out. The offensive line don't have to be Joe Moore Award finalists. The defense doesn't have to be top 10 in the country. Just be better than what you were last season. And I know that might sound like an easy recipe for success, especially when you look at they gave up 29.7 points per game and ranked 98th in the country. I understand that. But that's the difference between being 6-7 and 9-3 for this NC State team because of the talent that they have on their roster. You know, when you dive into the defensive side of the ball and who they have coming back and who they brought in from the portal, they have good pieces on their team. Now, they are going to have some question marks. You know, they did have some impactful departures. You know, their two leading defenders as far as interceptions go. And it's not like they ranked fantastic anyways when it came to picking off opposing quarterbacks. But 6 of their 10 interceptions last season, which ranked them 70th, came from 2 players last year. They're both gone. And so that's going to be interesting. Talking about Tamarcus Cooley and Bishop Fitzgerald, who combined for 6 interceptions. They're both tied for first on the team. You know, but then you look at some of the players that they brought in. The talent is there on the defensive level, but it's all going to come down to how well can DJ Elliott get them to perform.
Yeah.
As long as they are a more consistent group, statistically, they will just be better. Because again, in the same season that they allowed over 50 points to both Tennessee and Clemson, they also held Syracuse's offense to 24 points.
Yeah.
Find the in-between. Yeah. You know what I mean? Find the middle ground.
If you're consistently at 20 to 24, you're going to win a lot of games with this offense. I mean, that's the reality of it. I mean, you look at their team, I mean, you talk about their strengths. It starts up front in the box. I mean, the box has got talent, Trev. I mean, Travali Price is on my all ACC opponent team. So is Brandon Cleveland. And they're good football players. I mean, Travali Price is a 6'4", 283-pound kid who can line up on the tackle. He can also step down and play in the 3 technique if you go down to a four down look. In a couple games last year, I'm watching him play. I'm like, dude, this guy can ball. I mean, he's a kid that had 8.5 tackles for loss last year, 3.5 sacks, 36 tackles last season. He's been a guy that's been, you know, in the rotation here now for going on his 4th year. He's a good football player. Brandon Cleveland is a good football player. One of the better noses that Notre Dame is going to face this year. Big kid, you know, quality athlete for his size, Trev. You know, he's more of a plugger than he is like a disruptor, but he's pretty good at that role. And so, you know, you look at it and you say, man, there's some dudes to work with here for them. And even Isaiah Shirley, who is stepping into the starting lineup and he's replacing, I can't remember who their starter was there last year, but as a true freshman last year, Trev, he had 18 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a sack, and a forced fumble. That's not a bad day's work. It really isn't for a freshman. And then he had 6 of his 18 tackles in their last 3 games. So there's some talent there. There's some good depth there. They went to the portal and got some guys, but you know they've got with the defense they're going to run. You need to be big in those 3 spots, and as you can see, they've got some good size there. But then on the next level, obviously Caden Fordham comes back. He was one of their top guys last year. He was a starter for them at linebacker last year, and then Sean Brown was a guy that I considered for my All ACC team. He finished last year with 96 tackles. Finished last year with 8.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 13 quarterback hurries. My issue with Sean Brown is he missed way too many tackles last season. He played out of control a lot. If he can play cleaner football, he can be a 115, 110 tackle guy and be a double-digit tackle for loss guy. He's a little undersized, Trev, but that kid can flat out fly. He just has to play more disciplined football. The year before, he had 66 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks. I mean, this kid's played a lot of football. He just has to clean up the sacks. That was a big problem for him. And honestly, it was a big problem for the defense as a whole last season, Trevors. They missed a lot of tackles last year. 122 missed tackles in 13 games. That's almost 10 a game. I mean, you can't be there. You want to know why they had the issues that they had? That's a big reason right there. If you look at the Notre Dame defense, last year. Notre Dame had 135 missed tackles, which was a higher number. That was in 16 games. So you've got to clean that up. And to me, Sean Brown is a guy that especially needs to clean that up. If he can become a more disciplined player, he had 17 missed tackles last year, but he also had 22 pressures. He had 43 stops on top of all the. If he can just cut down, 5, just get down to 10 missed tackles, he's going to be a really good football player for them. There's a lot of talent to work with there in the front seven.
I mean, Sean Brown's performance, his individual performance last year is almost like a microcosm of how NC State's season went. The good is pretty darn good, and the rough is pretty rough. Another position group that I'm going to be paying attention to is kind of that strong side linebacker between Trey Thomas, and I'm probably going to butcher this guy's name, but Sion.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be interesting. Trey Thomas was actually at Temple in 2022 when DJ Elliott was their defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a little bit of familiarity with him. And then Sion last season, he came over from Utah State, but he racked up 49 tackles, 9.5 tackles for a loss, which led the team, 7.5 sacks, which led the team. He had 34 total pressures and 19 hits plus sacks on the quarterback last year at Utah State.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be interesting to see how that performance translates over to this level. Now, again, like we've talked about before, players jumping from level to level, I think, benefit more from going to the ACC or the Big 12 opposed to going to the SEC or the Big 10. So, but that combination right there is going to be interesting to see how well NC State's going to get after the pass or get after the quarterback.
The 19 hits on the quarterback, 19 hits plus sacks is what got me.
Yeah,
like that's the thing that I liked from him, and he didn't play a whole lot early in the season either. He only played 12 snaps against Robert Morris and only played 11 snaps against USC. So he didn't really kind of step into a bigger role till the second half of the season. And he was effective. But you look at his last 3 games against Hawaii, San Diego State, and Colorado State, he had in those 3 games, Trev, he had 16 pressures in those 3 games. And he had 7 sacks plus hits on the quarterback in the last 3 games.
Wow.
And then his last 5 games, he had 5 more pressures against Wyoming and 3 hits plus 2 sacks. I mean, so he really caught on late in the year, and became a more impactful player for them. But, Trey Thomas is another one that they got from Temple. You look at Sebastian Harsh, who's a depth player for them. They're too deep, and he's a guy that had 8.5 tackles for loss last year for Wyoming. You look at AJ Richardson, who's coming up from an FCS level. He's a guy that's in there too deep at linebacker. He had 82 tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss at the FCS level last year. So there's some athleticism there. Just got to play cleaner football. And if you look, they have one of the weirdest rosters I've ever seen. Like their linebacker roster, it has to be about 20 guys on their depth chart at linebacker. I pointed that out to you before. So I was like, dude, look at their roster. Look how many linebackers they have listed on their roster. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. But, and then the other big question, Trevor, is their secondary. Their secondary has to play way better than it did last year.
Yeah.
Way better. And they're counting, once again, on a lot of portal guys. J.J. Johnson's a portal guy. He came in from Georgia State, where he had 69 tackles last year. And Trev put all these numbers together, 69 tackles, 6 pass breakups. Jaron Sensabaugh comes in from Missouri. He was a freshman last year, didn't play a lot. He was a 247 had him as a top 250 player coming out of high school. He's an athletic kid. He's going to be nickel, compete for their corner spot. Jamel Johnson is another guy that's going to start in a cornerback. He came in from Temple, where he had 47 tackles, 9 pass breakups, 2 picks. Trev's numbers only allowed 17 catches on 47 targets. That's really good number at that AAC level. So how well their portal guys kind of get comfortable at the position is going to go a long way towards determining if their pass defense can get better than it was last year. If it's anything like it was last year, when you look at the teams they're going to play, it's going to be a long.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're going to have to find a way to improve their secondary play. And it's almost a complete 180 of where the offense was. Skill set wise on offense, it's kind of what carries the strength of the offense. However, on defense, the weakness lies in some of the skill in the back end. And they're going to have to do it with a bunch of transfer portal guys because, like I said, they're 2, on paper, statistically, their best defenders in the past last year, Tamarcus Cooley and Bishop Fitzgerald, they're both gone. They also lost Brandon Sissy, who I believe had 28 tackles, 5 passes defended last year as well. So I'm always up in the air about whole units of a team being put together with transfer portal guys, and they're not overly big. Starting safety, that's 5'9", 185. The other starting safety is 5'10". Their nickelback of all players is their biggest corner in Jaron Sensabaugh, but I believe he is also one of their more inexperienced corners. He transferred in from Missouri, but he only played 6 snaps last season in one game against Murray State. And so a lot of question marks about this secondary. The secondary, similar to the offensive line for NC State, will kind of hold in balance how well this team does. NC State's season will come down to, in a big way, their offensive line and their secondary. If they are able to make jumps and play more consistent than what they did, NC State's going to be a pretty good football team.
Agree. It's that simple, Trev. You nailed it. That's the key.
Mm-hmm.
Can they? And the other thing too is this right here. There's too much talent there for them to be that bad at stopping the run last year as they were last year.
Agreed.
Too much talent. That's what I say. A lot of this is looking at the players. This guy's got to do well. It's going to come down to DJ Elliott has to get this defense just playing sound football. That's the key. They have to play sound football. If they play sound football, they'll be good enough for this team to win a lot of games. It just is. It just is. There's talent on all three levels of this defense. There's way too much talent for their defense to look like what it did last year. It's just you've got to play sound football, and they were not sound last year at all. They were a very undisciplined football team last year, and that's got to get better. That's the number one priority for DJ Elliott. It's not about scheme. It's about they just have to be. I mean, scheme is part of it, but it's not about this particular scheme or that particular scheme or well, we don't have enough talent here. We have to play sound football. If NC State plays sound football on defense and just lets their talent take over, and if their offensive line just plays solid football, this is going to be one of the best teams in the ACC. I truly believe the talent is that good. But that's the problem. We go back to what we talked about at the very beginning, Trev, when we talk about Dave Doeren's football teams. We just don't know what we're going to get from year to year and game to game. And he has to find a way to make this team more consistent because the talent is that of an 8 to 9+ win team. It really is. But can you get that talent to play to its full potential week after week after week? Like Notre Dame ran for over 300 yards against NC State in 2017. Now, I know that offensive line was great, but you had 4 defensive linemen that got picked in the first 4 rounds of the draft, and a middle linebacker got picked in the 3rd round. You had no business giving up over 300 to Notre Dame. 200, okay, fine, I get it. It's a great O-line, and they got Josh Adams. But over 300, including a 70-something yard touchdown run from Josh Adams where he doesn't get touched, that's discipline, and that's been an issue for Dave Doeren's teams for a long time. He's got to fix that. If he can fix that, his program's not – they're real close to kind of taking that jump, Trev. That's what's so frustrating watching this team play. You're like, dude, you guys have way too much talent to be this mediocre. You know, it's like the Notre Dame game 2 years ago. They're hanging with Notre Dame, and then turnover, ball game. It's not even – it's a blowout. Giving up an 80-yard touchdown run out of the break. It's stuff like that. You're just like, dude, like, what are you doing? And if they can clean that up, I really like this team if they can clean that up. I'm telling you, man, this could end up being a team on you're like, man, that helped Notre Dame's resume at the end of the year. That helped Miami's resume beating them at the end of the year. You know, like that's what we're talking about with some of the better teams on the schedule saying, boy, you know, Clemson's going to have their hands full in the ACC title game this weekend. Like that's what this team can be. But to your point, Trev, I could also see him going 5-7, 6-6. Like,
well, and that's the tough part about NC State is we talk a lot, man, they got new coordinators and they got these pieces. And a lot of times when a team gets a new coordinator, it kind of sparks a little bit of like, oh, okay, here we go. Like maybe things are going to turn around. But Dave Doeren's been through a good amount of coordinators during his time at NC State. But the one thing that their program always has in common is they are inconsistent week to week, quarter to quarter, month to month. Shoot, sometimes it's play by play. And so if NC State's truly going to turn around, Dave Doeren is going to kind of have to look in the mirror a little bit and say, okay, what adjustments do I need to make to get the most out of this roster? Because it is a very talented roster, but this is not an easy schedule for him. So, Bryan, let's talk about predictions for NC State this upcoming season. How do you see this year unfolding for them?
I was in a good mood when I put my breakdown of NC State together. And honestly, I feel like that's what's going to determine how you predict NC State to be. What kind of mood are you in going into that? Because the reason I say that, Trev, is I'm being serious. Like I'm joking, but I'm also being serious because when I look at this football team, let's pull up their schedule again. When I look at that team, I say, listen, there's a world in which they're 6-0 and ranked coming into the Notre Dame game. Look, is Virginia going to be a cakewalk? No. Should they win that game? Absolutely. Same with ECU. Is ECU going to be a cakewalk? No, they should win. I don't think Wake Forest is going to be that good, but they lost at home to Wake Forest last year. Shouldn't have. You should win that football game. Duke on the road, it's going to be a challenge. It's a good football team, but that's one they are capable of winning. Virginia Tech at home, that's going to be a tough game. Like their start to the season is not easy, but they're all winnable games. And then you play Campbell, who was a 3-9 FCS team last year. At worst case scenario, they're 5-1 going into the Notre Dame game, possibly 6-0. So if there's a way that you can come out of that Notre Dame game 6-1, excuse me, let's get back to that. Of course, now it doesn't want to. Now is the first time all day where it doesn't want to switch over. I swear I hate this thing sometimes. But there's a world if they can come out of that Notre Dame game and be 6-1, that this football team has a chance to go in, come out of that bye week saying, hey, we got something to play for. And that's where NC State gets dangerous, because if this team goes into late October, November with something to play for, it means two things. One is they have figured out some of the things that have plagued them in the early part of the season. Whatever happens against Notre Dame, you've got a bye week to recover from it. Meaning if you upset Notre Dame, you have a bye week to kind of get over the emotion of it and get back to focus on what's in front of you, where we've seen with Notre Dame and other teams, you kind of have that big win and then you kind of sleepwalk through that next week. But if you get beat by Notre Dame, you've got a week to recover from it. And then you play Pitt on the road, which is going to be a good football team. You play Georgia Tech at home. It's a good football team. Then another bye, and then Miami, Florida State, North Carolina. So if they're 6-1 coming out of that break, the second part of it, Trevor, is now that team has not only found answers, but they're now a young, confident football team. And that's when NC State gets really dangerous, when they start believing in themselves like, hey, we are as good as anybody we play. Because if NC State plays to their full potential, there's no reason they can't go 4-1 down the stretch. Worst case scenario, like 3-2. But here's the thing, Trev. If they're 6-1 coming out of that first bye, and their only loss is Notre Dame, they're undefeated in league play. Yeah. They've already got 4 wins in league play. They can afford to lose 2 games and still have a shot to play in the ACC title game. That's where I'm going 9-3 is my prediction. I have them losing to Notre Dame. I have them losing to Miami, and then I think they lose one of Duke, Pitt, or Georgia Tech. So I'm in a good mood today. I'm feeling good about NC State putting it all together, and it really comes down to whenever I start watching CJ Bailey film, I get in a good mood.
That's fair.
So that's part of it too. But I think this team has a shot to be that. Now I could also see them going 6-6, but if I'm putting money on it, I got NC State right now 9-3. I'd say 8-4 is possible. But I think 8-9 wins is what the expectation should be for this football team this year. So I have 8-4. You know, lose to Duke, lose to Notre Dame, lose to Georgia Tech, and then lose to Miami. 8-4. That's a pretty good season for NC State, in my opinion. But I think they're capable of going 9-3, and so I'm going to have some fun today and pick the old Wolfpack to go 9-3 because no one's expecting anything out of them. And based on Dave Doran's track record, in years where you don't have high expectations, that's when this team has been the most dangerous.
I've been going back and forth on this prediction for them. And right now, and I could be wrong, and part of me hopes that I am wrong, especially for what it means for Notre Dame. I think they have too many questions for Dave Doran to overcome. I love the talent on their roster. I truly do. I think CJ Bailey's going to be a dude this year. I think they're going to be 5-1 coming into the Notre Dame game. And I think the only game that they drop is at home to Virginia Tech. But I think they will be 5-1 coming into South Bend. And I don't think it will end up being the trap game that we think it will be because NC State will be 5-1. And I don't see Marcus Freeman or Notre Dame sleepwalking through an opponent that might be a fringe top 25 team at that point in time and being 5-1. Where I do see it becoming a trap game is if they enter that 3-3 because of the talent on their roster. But if NC State's 5-1, I don't think that Notre Dame sleepwalk through that game. I think they get beat pretty handily. And then I think the wheels kind of start to fall off from there. And so I have NC State going 7-5, but I do have them winning their bowl game to finish 8-5 to kind of keep Dave Dorn around one more year. Because he does have, we went 6-7 last year. We went 8-5 this year. We have a young quarterback. We had 2 first-year coordinators. And that's how I see it playing out for them. So I do, at the end of the day, have them going and getting 8 wins this year. But 7-5 in the regular season, that tough stretch at the end, really after their first bye, really begins with Notre Dame. But the only game that I'm confident in saying that I think that they just will straight up win is against North Carolina, because I think they're going to be really bad this year. But all the other ones, it's kind of like
we see that one the same way.
Yeah. But it's going to be another frustrating year because it's like they go 8-5. They have talent on their roster. It is an improvement from the year before, but it should have been better. And I think there's going to be some head-scratching performances in there. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to allow something like, 38 points on the road against Pitt. But then at home against Georgia Tech, and Haynes King and Jamal Haynes are going to do something like hold them to 120 rushing yards for the entire game.
Yeah.
Or something like that, So I have them going 7-5 in the regular season and winning their bowl game, whoever it is against, to go 8-5.
The reason that I would be willing to kind of say because normally there's not like a disagreement. The reason that I would say if we had to bet, I'd bet more towards me being right is really what it comes down to, Trev, because I don't disagree with a lot of what you said about this team. But a good quarterback with good talent around them can overcome a lot of coaching mistakes. Miami went 10-2 last year, and they were every bit as undisciplined as NC State was, if not more so. Now, I'm not saying that CJ Bailey's Cam Ward. I'm simply making the point that they went 6-6 last year with freshman version of CJ Bailey and
sure.
and freshman version of all those players. I think this is one of the best skill units that Notre Dame is going to face, for example. And Noah Rogers is a legit guy. Justin Jai's a legit guy. It really comes down to, if you think CJ Bailey is what I think he is, then you'd have to have a bad coaching job to go 6-6 and 7-5. That's something Dave Dorn's capable of. I'm simply saying that's where I understand where you're coming from. I just think their skill talent on offense is such that they will give up those 38 points to Pitt and still win.
I think that's
some
fair.
of those games like that. That's where I'm coming from, where their defense sucks against the transfer quarterback that Duke got, and they give up 35 points, but they score 38. Like that's why I have more optimism.
Sure.
I don't think Dave Dorn's going to necessarily figure it out in year 15 or year 14. Yeah. I just think their skill talent is so good that it's just going to not matter in a few games. Like, so 7-5 coaching with that talent equals 9-3 season. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
The talent overcomes a couple of those games that I say, like, I don't even disagree with like your premise of some of those games. It's just, I could see all that happening, and then CJ Bailey hits Noah Rogers over the top for a touchdown with a minute and a half left, and they win a game. Like that. That's where I'm coming from.
No, I get that completely. This team honestly kind of has the makings of 2014 Notre Dame. Look at the skill talent. It's like, how does an offense with that skill talent end the regular season 6-6? You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those.
Yeah,
where
7-5 that year, right? Like
7-5.
Just like with Everett Golson and Will Fuller and and Torian Folston. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, I could see it being something like that.
DJ Elliott's might be a bad coach, but he ain't Brian Van Gorder.
That's also true. That's also true. It's like, what balances out? Like, DJ Elliott won't be Brian Van Gorder, but will they have a Jalen Smith? Like, it's
right,
man.
Right, exactly.
It's up in the air, man.
Exactly. No, I kid on that, but that's honestly where my confidence comes from. I just think the talent on offense is such that unless the offensive line just completely falls apart or CJ Bailey gets hurt, I just think this team is going to be able to overcome some of those coaching issues.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I'm at.
I get that.
So, that's good stuff, Trev.
Well, all right, folks, that's going to do it today for our preview of Notre Dame's tight ends and the NC State preview. Brian and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. for Buy, Sell, Hold. It is Wednesday. Salty already has the thread up on the board. So if you are a message board member, please be sure to get your submission in. And if you're not a message board member, I strongly suggest going to boards.irishbreakdown.com, becoming a premium message board member, and you could submit as many buy, sell, holds as your little heart desires. But that'll do it for us today. Before you head out of here, folks, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. That is how we grow Irish Breakdown, is drawing and attracting more listeners to it. And what are they going to do first? They're going to scroll through the reviews and see what other people, like-minded Notre Dame fans, think of this show. So we greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So for Brian, I'm Trev. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.